please call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld? We need to unmute everybody.
Aye. Here, present.
Mrs. Berry?
Here.
Mrs. Pardee?
Here.
Mrs. Weiss?
Here.
Mr. Ertl?
Here.
I'm sorry, was there
Mr. Gould?
here for Mr. Ertl?
Mr. Ertl?
Okay, thank you.
He's here. I saw his picture before. Mr. Rock?
Here.
Mr. Gould?
Here.
Mr. Ertl, are you back yet? I can just add him in when he comes back in.
Okay, very good. In the event that does not happen, is there a motion to excuse Mr. Ertl?
So moved, Mayor.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Rock and a second by Mr. Gould. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll on the motion to excuse?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay, very good. The motion carries. Will all those who are able please rise and join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Allegiance to the flag
of America
of the United States of America,
and
to the republic for which it stands,
The republic for
One
which it
nation.
stands, one nation,
one nation,
under God, indivisible,
under God,
with liberty and
indivisible,
justice for all.
with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Does everyone have the
Mayor, I have a
minutes?
few
Mayor,
comments.
I'll
on
make
the
a
minutes.
motion.
Oh, well, before we hear the motion, Mr. Rock, did you have something?
Yes, I have a few comments. I'm gonna look here on page 1. Under present and absent, and it lists Mr. Ertl as absent, but he made a motion to accept the meeting minutes from April 20th, so he would not have been absent, but I don't remember. I think he was there. But he did make a motion in the next item, so there's certainly no consistency there. So let's take a look at that. And then on page, I gotta find it. I believe it's page 3. First item, first sentence there, Mr. Rock asked for clarification of the steps that occurs if the legislation is passed. The next sentence should just say, would there be a presentation by Knez? Instead of is there. So make that would there be. I think that was it.
Okay. As to the first item, if we're going to make a correction, I guess we need to know what the correction is. Does anyone recall A, was Mr. Ertl present, and B, so either A, he was present and there was, and the listing of him moving to approve the minutes is incorrect, or he was not present
Mr. Erdl was not present.
Okay, well then,
I'll make the correct, I'll
okay.
make the other correction to who, motion for minutes approval.
Okay, yeah, I mean, you have a recording, so we should know who that was. It just, so it just wouldn't be
It was
Phil.
Mrs. Pardee, it was Mrs. Pardee and Mr. Rock.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. So we have that correction. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes of May 4, 2020 with the corrections as just discussed?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second? Is that a second by Mrs. Blankfeld?
I'll second.
Okay, very good. I
Yes,
saw
ma'am.
I saw your frame light up. I couldn't hear you though. Okay, very good. So we have a motion second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll on the motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Next is the comments from the audience. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. Total time allowed is 15 minutes per meeting unless otherwise permitted by Council Ordinance number 91-25. Is there anybody here who would care to address the city this evening? If you would please raise your hand. I see Mr. Buttiglione. I see some others. I will start with Mr. Buttiglione. I will unmute you now, sir, and you have, well, Kelly, I think you need to unmute him, and then he'll have 5 minutes. Very good. You may proceed, sir. Please state your name and address for the record first, and then you may proceed.
Can you hear me okay?
We can now. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Daniel Mattigli, 2201 Milton Road, University Heights, Ohio. I've lived in this community for approximately 4 years. I'd just like to say that I was saddened and disappointed that the pool is not going to be opening this year. I was hoping that you have received calls on this and that there's some pushback to open the pool. I'm sure that council can come to some reasonable accommodations in order to open the pool, such as limiting occupancy, monitoring, social distancing and the like. And I think it's the benefits outweigh the problems that you're going to encounter. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the mayor, and I thank council.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Okay, who else would like to address the city? Okay, Kelly, it just says iPhone. We don't have a name here. Do you see who that is waving?
Sorry.
There's an iPhone and an
unmuted.
iPad. They both want to speak, so we'll make sure they each get a turn here. The woman who's
Sorry,
speaking.
I'm new
Yes,
to
you-
Zoom.
Okay, if you would just state your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Council. My name is Susan Flick. I'm at 3806 Clare Ridge Oval. I've lived in University Heights with my family for about 13 years. Most recently, my husband, who works from home, saw the inspector that's doing the external inspections throughout the city. My husband went out and met with him, and they discussed some problems that we had been aware of in our home, in particular some brick top pointing and some work we need to do to our front stoop. I felt compelled to come on the meeting tonight. I am a nurse practitioner at university hospitals and very involved with the COVID virus right now. I have some concerns regarding the inspections and recommendations to have certain work done within a period of time. My concern not only is making sure that we're maintaining the social distancing, but also concern for people that may be unemployed right now and not have the resources to complete the violations and things done. And I understand if it's an emergency or some risk to safety of our citizens, it is important to really address these issues. But I just felt compelled after speaking with the mayor over the weekend that we really should be sending a message to our community, putting our safety number one, and also being recognizing the financial situation that a lot of our people are in right now with being unemployed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Flick. I am going to address that in my mayor's report this evening, but I appreciate you bringing it up, and I will comment on that further in my report. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Kelly, the woman whose screen just says iPad, I know she wanted to speak. Do you see her? She's wearing the pink top.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. Okay, very good. Yes, if you would state your name and address for the record, and then you have up to 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Gladys Everhard, and my address is 2484 Warrensville Center Road. I really don't have any complaints. I've lived out of the city. I just moved back 2 weeks ago. I was gone for 10 years. I've owned a home here for about 20 years. And I just wanted to reintroduce myself to everyone. So I decided the best way to do that was to attend a council meeting this evening. And I did have a few questions this morning. Thank you. I did have a few questions this morning, but Ms. Thomas, she answered all of my questions. So I would like to thank her for taking the time to do that.
Okay, very good. Well, welcome back, Mrs. Everhart. Welcome back to the city.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Is there anybody else who wanted to address the city this evening? If yes, if you would raise your hand, please. I'm going to scroll through the different feeds here to make sure I'm not missing anybody. I don't think I see anybody else who wants to address the city at this point. I don't want to leave anybody out, so. All right. It would seem then that we have gone through the folks who want to address the city this evening. Thank you for being here to do that. And we will now go to the reports and communications from the mayor and the taking of action. Okay, so this past Thursday, we announced the closure of the pool at Purvis Park and the cancellation of summer activities here in the city of University Heights through Labor Day weekend. These are cherished things, our pool, our events, things that bring our community together and help make University Heights so much more than home. As I stated at the time of the announcement, while we each assume a certain amount of risk in our daily lives, there are risks associated with opening the pool and conducting summer activities beyond what is normally associated with these activities and beyond what is acceptable during this pandemic. We cannot say these activities are safe now or will be made safe in the near future. Since our announcement, the state of Ohio has granted permission for pools to open provided certain rules can be followed, certain guidelines met. Anyone who has reviewed those rules and guidelines and knows our pool can easily conclude that none of these are practical for our pool, not in the way our pool is traditionally used and not given our location in a COVID-19 hot zone. You will hear announcements of more municipal pools closing in the name of public safety. I also want to address the suggestion by some in the community that these moves were not done as a matter of public safety, but only to save money. There is undeniably a cost savings to not opening the pool. Last year, we hired 77 part-time employees to work summer rec. This year, we will have none. But I will remind the community that the city entered this pandemic in a solid financial position. On December 31, 2019, across all cash balances and fund balances, the amounts available, unencumbered, and uncommitted totaled $7.93 million for all funds. That included our bank balances and investments. That represented our starting point in 2020. And while income tax collection today is behind where it was at this time last year, as our finance director has reported and will continue to report, the city's investment portfolio as of April 30th had a balance of $6.75 million. Suffice it then to state that if the pool had been safe to open, if concerts were safe to attend, we would be doing those things. We have canceled them in 2020 for reasons of public safety. But as for the money, we are reviewing the city's costs and expenses, and with that, our priorities. COVID-19 has not gone away and will continue to be a problem, first of public health, but also one that affects our economy. At the same time, we have room to be deliberate and not hasty. The necessity of 80-hour furloughs I previously raised remains undetermined. Any discussion of layoffs is premature. The reopening of Ohio has just gotten underway, and we should allow time to see how it works. There is no need to take drastic measures or undermine what is going right for the city. In the meantime, the services this city provides are essential. Unlike most of our surrounding communities, we don't have a rec center, a community center, or a senior center. Our efforts are primarily focused on public safety, law enforcement, fire and EMS, solid waste removal, infrastructure maintenance, and keeping clear lines of communication open with our residents during this critical time. We have updated our residents every day that the governor has a press conference. The information is critical as a matter of public safety, and the positive feedback we have received from our residents has been overwhelming. While municipal buildings remain closed to the public, there are several items on the agenda that will allow for their eventual reopening. The work of the several departments continues, including building and housing. And as I mentioned them specifically, because there have been some complaints over the city continuing some of its building and housing operations, focusing on 3 programs in particular. In the absence of a department head, I will address these items now. First, the exterior maintenance program. We have this program to help ensure the maintenance of our housing stock. Our houses are well built, but they are growing older. In this administration's overhaul of the program, we divided the city into 5 sections. Inspections in Section A, which is in the southwest area of the city, are underway. I've received some concern from residents in that area of town, and we also heard from one this evening. And I want to reassure her and reassure them that the city is always willing to work with residents on resolving exterior code violations. We know that homes didn't reach a certain condition overnight, and some time may be needed to put them back, and that this is especially frustrated now with people being off work, contractors not being available, and by public health considerations. If you get a notice of violations, we will work with you if you need us to. You just have to call us. Get a dialogue going. Let's work together on a plan that you can achieve, understanding all the circumstances we are facing. Secondly, one program near and dear to my heart, the grass nuisance and abatement program. If you get a yellow tag, this is not a citation. There is no fine in getting a yellow tag. That yellow tag is just a notice. And yes, it is a notice that requires attention, but there is nothing in the Stay Safe Ohio order that prohibits lawn maintenance. However, if you aren't able to cut your grass because you are sick, or you've been putting in extra time as an essential worker, or some other extenuating circumstance, just let us know. We can work with you on that as well, but we just need to hear from you. Thirdly, the point of sale inspection program continues. However, due to COVID-19 considerations, we have postponed interior inspections for the time being to avoid delay in closings of homes till after the current emergency. With the assistance of the law director, we have a form in place for buyers to sign that allow closings to proceed with the buyer assuming the violations based upon an inspection to be scheduled at a later date. Cleveland Heights is doing essentially the same thing. One real estate agent complained to me about this last month and said that the prospective buyer for the house he was selling wouldn't sign that form. But in the day I took to review the matter, ultimately, the buyer did. As of the time of that complaint, 6 houses had closed since the pandemic, where the buyers agreed to assume the violations on all of them. I had my assistant, Rachel Mullen, pull these numbers. As of 8 o'clock this morning, there are 19 active listings in University Heights on the MLS, with 53 more houses under contract, and now 49 houses have closed in the past 60 days, which are all within the time of this emergency. Now, some of those homes may have had inspections that were completed before the emergency, but houses are continuing to sell in this city, continuing to close in this city, all in spite of the pandemic and the emergency. For consistency of administration and in fairness to all new purchasers here in University Heights, we will keep the program in place. We have a workable policy that is working for the department, working for buyers and sellers and their agents, and has, for the most part, proceeded without complaint. The only other complaints I have received seem to be from agents who have objections to the point of sale program in general and would like to see it abolished. That would take an act of council, and I don't believe anyone here on council supports that. I am satisfied our temporary practice is appropriate and serves the city's interests and remains in the interests of all involved. I went over with Councilwoman Blankfeld the city's emergency policy and practice about a month ago now. But if there are any concerns about this practice, I'm happy to discuss this further with her or with any other member of council. Finally, not wanting to steal the thunder of Mr. Scora of GT Environmental, our consultant who will be addressing us shortly on the solid waste study, I will state this. While this city does run lean in most respects, there is one area where we outspend almost every other Cuyahoga County city, and that is in the area of trash collection. We owe it to our constituents as responsible stewards of their tax dollars to ensure that we deliver effective, quality solid waste removal and disposal while controlling costs. This is an opportunity to simultaneously improve recycling, which many of our residents have asked for, and save hundreds of thousands of tax dollars each year. As we look for ways to save money in 2020, this deserves our consideration, not just by this council, but by the public we all represent. Many of us are fond of backyard pickup, me included, but I'm not fond of the additional expense or the way we presently recycle, which requires us to throw away 4,000 or more blue bags a week, and also, which is not conducive to cardboard recycling, as more and more people get deliveries at home. We have a committee of the whole meeting tomorrow, and as we discuss the budget, we must take up this issue there for budgetary reasons. I will stop there because this truly is Mr. Score's report, and this concludes my report. So the next item on the agenda is the presentation from James Scora, GT Environmental, the final rubbish study report. Now, I believe Mr. Scora is here on the call. I did see him earlier. I believe also that he
Yeah.
has forwarded a PowerPoint that has, I believe, been distributed to members of council. The final report was released to us, I believe, earlier today, and everybody on council should have received it by email sometime today. I think that may have also been posted on our website as well. And then with that, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Mr. Scora. I believe Kelly has also worked out co-hosting arrangements so that he may utilize the desktop sharing feature to put things up on the screen. So, Mr. Scora, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Right now it says that the host is disabled participant screen sharing.
Try again, Jim.
All right. Everybody see the screen?
Yes, we see it, Jim.
Okay, great. All right, so thank you, Mayor, for the introduction and a good synopsis of the results that I will be presenting to you all tonight. And also, interestingly enough, about 11 years ago, very similar assessment of the program, and that's originally why we were hired, was to update what we call the 2009 solid waste collection analysis study that we did and finalized back in October of 2009. And the screenshot here shows, or the slide shows, that final report cover, as well as the new one, which was an update to that report back in 2009 that we finished in May of 2020. And like all good consulting projects, we always look back and analyze the current program. And as a part of our scope of work, that was our first task, was to take a look at what changed from 11 years ago or 10 years ago when we started this. And some of the improvements that you have made. You have different collection equipment, as we see here on the screen, with the Kubota versus the Cushman scooters from back in the day, but you still fundamentally collect trash and recyclables the same way for the most part 11 years ago as you do currently. Some quick statistics. We use 2018 as our reference point. When we started this project last year, we had a full year in 18 to look at. The population, almost 13,000, 4,200 households. Trash tons picked up in the year, 4,500. Recycling tons very low at 335 tons. Yard waste, 1,228. And some of your revenue, about $19,000 in revenue. Most of that is your special pickups that you charge when folks want extra material picked up. A little bit of recycling revenue, and your expenses. And so these are numbers we show throughout the entire presentation. In 2018, you spent $1.2 million in your trash and collection, recyclable collection program. We did look at your missed pickups, which was something we did also in 2009. This is when folks say that, or call in and say that their materials were not picked up, whether it was trash or recyclables. This graph looks very similar to what was done in 2009. It seems to be an ongoing with most cities and most programs, where there's going to be folks that either didn't put their stuff out, or of course nowadays with all the technology that the private sector is using, they actually will have GPS points that will say when they were at a particular house at a particular time, which always helps when folks call in to say that they missed putting their material out. But anyways, that wasn't the focus of the project, but we did capture that. We talk about what you do with your trash and recyclables, going to the transfer station in Glen Willow in 2018, 4,500 tons, as I mentioned earlier, and then recyclables to Kimball's transfer, which you bring over there for no cost. We did look, and this was some additional information that some of the council members in the committee wanted to know, was of your 13 staff that are involved in the collection of trash and recyclables and yard waste, what is the distribution of the folks that are working for you? So you had 5 full-time for rubbish, 2 part-time, 4 full-time in rubbish, and then another 3 part-time, your recycling, yard waste, bulk collection, and then your maintenance folks that added up to 13. That was really important because council wanted to know if we changed different collection systems, how would that affect staffing? And so we will definitely show that in the other presentation or as I go on. We had some general observations. The mayor kind of alluded to the one, which is that because of the system that you use for collection, especially on the recycle side, there is limited capacity on the Kubotas to hold material. They're essentially 2 small 30 or 40 gallon containers on the front of the truck, front of the Kubotas that recyclables can go into. Of course, as I showed a picture earlier, residents are required to bag the recyclables, put it out with their trash, and then the Kubota drivers will pick that up. They have limited capacity for the material. So what we noticed in some of the comments here was there was a significant amount of cardboard that was not being put into the front containers for recycle because, for one, it wouldn't fit. 2, they may have been full, and so a lot of that cardboard that the residents separated for recycling ended up going in the trash or the back dump part of the Kubota and ultimately into the landfill. There were some other logistical and observations from when we follow the trash and recycling crews throughout the day when we spent time on the routes. But we wanted to get into the nuts and bolts of the comparison and contrasting of the program, which you have as a backyard side door program, to other communities in Cuyahoga County, primarily, that have a very good mixture of one other backdoor side door program, other curbside programs operated by the municipality, and curbside programs that are under a private contract to the community under a competitive process. And so these are the communities that we looked at. There are a few changes from the 2009 study, a couple additions, but for the most part, similar with the amount of communities we looked at, some population and median income comparisons there. One of the things we wanted to look at when we looked at the data is how much tons are collected. Obviously, the standout here is Lakewood. Normally, we wouldn't look at Lakewood as a comparison to the city because it is much larger, but they were one of the communities that transferred from or transitioned from a backdoor side door service to a curbside automated program. And so we felt that was important to keep them in the study. You can see the remaining communities there were fairly similar in the amount of trash that were disposed of annually in 2018. As the mayor mentioned, in the cost department, as you can understand, and absolutely no disrespect to your great system, it's a very costly system. When we did routing studies back in 2009 and we did an update in 2019, it essentially takes on average about 50 to 54, almost a minute, upwards of 60 seconds or a minute for one house to be serviced for trash recycling. And when you think about an automated truck that goes by that can pick up trash and dump the cart and put the cart back down in seconds. So you can see that the difference is that it's just more expensive to do a backdoor service. And you can kind of see this in this cost per ton analysis where University Heights was the largest cost per ton to manage the materials collected because of the backdoor service. It's not because you're necessarily being grossly inefficient. That's not the case. It's just the nature of collection. It's just, it takes longer to pick up the materials than a curbside program or an automated curbside program. So again, no disrespect. Cost per household, different variances here, and we'll kind of summarize the averages in a couple slides from now. Your calculated cost, now you don't charge residents per month per household, but that's kind of the industry standard, the common denominator we use when we're comparing costs on a per household basis. You're at $23.74, and you can see the communities that we had data from and what their costs are. And again, I'll show you the statistics. One of the things we did is look at private contracts. within Cuyahoga County, you can see there's a fair amount of communities in 2018 that had a private contract. And we made sure to adjust the numbers to include trash recycling and yard waste. The average cost was $14.18 per month per household. University Heights is at $23.74, Shaker at $15.87, and then you can see the variety, going in an escalating basis, how much the costs are per household. Again, the average being $14.18. South Euclid was a community that we focused on as well. We had good data from them from their previous contract that went through 2012 to 2018. This is a private contract operated on behalf of the city in a competitive process. Their bids back in 2012 through 18 were anywhere from $10 to $12 per month per household. They just recently opened bids up, Jeff, so I added this to the slide. Their bid price was $14.87. It's a 5-year contract and escalates up to $16.90 at the end of that 5-year term. Now, Lakewood, we talked about Lakewood and we wanted to show the difference in Lakewood. Now, obviously they're a much bigger, probably 3 to almost 4 times bigger in budget than the great city of University Heights. But what's interesting about Lakewood is that we wanted to use them because they had a backdoor side door service back in 08. And right at that time, we're transitioning to an automated collection. They bought the trucks, the containers, and they converted their city to automated. So this table on the top shows the operational differences of their budget from 08 when they were backdoor side door to 2018 when they are, obviously they were well on their way of operating many years under an automated curbside program. So what we saw was their operational costs went down 10% from 8 to 2018. Their rubbish tons went down 15% because the recycling went up 25%. The number of households were the same, and their overall cost difference in the household costs went down by 10%. Now, when we compare that to University Heights over that same time frame, your operational expenses went up 19% from 08 to 18. Your rubbish tons went down 20%. Your recycling tons were about the same. Households were about the same, and your operational costs were up 15% overall from 2008 to 18. So you can see the difference between a side door service that stayed the same for all intents and purposes. Although you did upgrade some equipment, did do some efficiencies, and then Lakewood, who operated a backdoor service and upgraded to automated in that time frame. And you can see the difference in the cost, which I think is unique, even though they're much bigger than you. Some more Lakewood analysis now. In 18, they purchased a truck in cash. And so we show their operating costs 2 different ways, either 3.9 million or 3.6 million, because they did spend some cash on some equipment. Again, the cost here without capital, if they wouldn't have bought the equipment, it was $21.89. With capital, $23.68. And this is the cost per household per month. You're at the $23.74. On a per capita basis, they're at $6.62 per person per month per year, or per person per month. You're at $7.84. And again, your operating expenses about that 1.2. Now the mayor mentioned recycling performance, and this is an additional analysis we did after we had most of the project done, which was to look at some of these comparable communities and how well they recycle as compared to University Heights. You're at 7%. This is all Cuyahoga County Solid Waste Management District data. And as you can see, Lakewood is at 22%. So they're about 3 times better on a percent diversion basis than University Heights. The average percent diversion is 18.18%. And again, you're at 7%. So part of that reason is not that your residents don't want to recycle, they are recycling. But again, I mentioned there is limitations to what your system of collection can handle from a capacity standpoint. That's certainly part of it. When you go to automated, you certainly increase the capacity with the carts where you can recycle more material and capture more material for recycling, including that larger cardboard. So I just wanted to show that from a performance standpoint, again, no disrespect to University Heights, it's just some of it's the way you collect and the limitations to the equipment that you use is partly to blame for your low performance on recycling. So we talk about, when I talked earlier about the averages, I wanted to show that your city average, again, for cost per month per household, $23.74. The average public sector side door, back door was $21.25. The average curbside public sector program is operated by the community is $18.90, and the average private sector contract $14.18. If we would apply those costs per household per month numbers to your households, if you were to change those programs, you would see the savings, obviously zero if you didn't change anything, and anywhere from $100,000 to almost $500,000 a year in savings, depending on which program. So this was just a snapshot way to show. I showed this exact same table back 11 years ago. Obviously, the numbers were a little bit different because it was a different time period, but it was a way to show you from a cost standpoint, using a different system of collection, whether public, private, curbside, or not curbside, what those annualized costs could be in potential cost savings. That was just one way to look at it. I'm going to show you the additional ways to look at it as well. Now, a couple more slides. One of the things that we did is we did take a look at existing program improvements by these 7 categories that's in the report, things that you could do without changing your collection program, but just making improvements to your program. For obviously, promotion and education awareness are a very important part of that. So we made a suggestion about that. Also about customer service and getting data from residents, the trash program, rerouting the city. We threw in there, we mentioned a tidbit about your residents that have gates or where they have driveway parking issues, that obviously could lead to some of your missed pickups and callbacks, and try to improve that. If you were to transition to curbside service, you need to provide side door service to folks that have disabilities. And if you were to transition to curbside, you could also offer a side door service for an extra fee if folks didn't want to do the curbside. Interesting enough, and I've said this to the mayor a couple times, you require residents, as you all know, to put trash recyclables at their side door, back door, and your folks pick it up at that point. Your yard waste is required to be put at the curb. So you kind of have a hybrid system where residents have to drag those heavy yard waste bags down to the curb, but yet their trash recycling stays up at the side door or back door, depending on the nature of their homes. So it's kind of a unique situation. And many times in some of those, what I consider one of my observations I had when I followed trucks around is some of the shorter driveways, you would have folks that their trash would be up against their garage door, which is maybe 20 feet away from their curb. And then they put their yard waste out there. So it was kind of a unique thing to see that. It's just part of your community. Again, no disrespect, but it was just unique to see that folks would have to move one thing, but not the other. And of course, some folks have very long driveways and hills, and there's challenges to some of that as well from a curbside program. On the recycling side, we talked about cardboard being a big issue, especially now during COVID, a big increase in cardboard that we're seeing across the country. A lot of that cardboard is not making it to your recycling processor because of, again, the nature of the collection. So I mentioned that. The plastic ban, right now you require folks to put recyclables into a plastic bag. Obviously, you all know about the Cuyahoga County plastic ban. I haven't kept up with it here recently. There was a delay in the enforcement of it. Did kick off in January, but the grocery store bags were the ones that were targeted for being banned from being used for trash recycling programs. So certainly getting away from a bagged program for recyclables would be helpful for the Cuyahoga County ban. And then, of course, I mentioned something about modifying your Packer trucks to be able to hold more material. Shaker Heights does that. So they have a separate, and you used to have that, but back in the day, I believe, but Shaker Heights has a separate storage space on their Packer trucks where they can put more recyclables in there and try to capture some of that stuff. So we talk about that a little bit, as well as modifying the Kubotas to have more of a capacity. The paper program, if you go to curbside, and you probably really don't need paper and have folks drive down to the garage because they could put the paper at their curb if you went to a curbside program. So a vast majority of our analytical process was looking at these different models, some of them being new that council members requested, and how that would look out into the future from a cost per month or cost, an annualized cost in this particular case, as well as a cost per month for the residents. So your side door, back door is your current program. That's the $1.2 million. And we do escalate that into 2023 and 2028. Costs go up, you pay people more money. Recycling processing is going up right now. You don't pay anything. It's going to go up to 50, 60. I've seen as high. City of Brooklyn just did a bid for recycle processing. Their low was $52 a ton and their high was over $120 a ton for delivered materials to recycling processing. So we factored in an increase in your recycle processing cost into those future years. The next row is a curbside rear load pickup using your current trucks, doing it at the curb. So you wouldn't have to buy new trucks. You wouldn't have to buy bins. You would use your existing trucks. Your cost per month is lowered by a couple dollars, and your annualized cost range from anywhere from $115,000 to $300,000 of savings over your existing program. The backyard trash manual bin program was a suggestion by one of the council members that said, hey, if we kept our backyard trash the same, but we bought the little 18-gallon, I call them the little laundry basket recycle containers, they're cheaper to buy. If we provided every resident with one of those, they could put their recyclables in that. They do have, you can get them with lids, so you can not have to bag the material, and then that would be placed at the curb, and you'd have to have a separate truck come and pick that up. That ended up being more costly on our estimation than your current program, and that's why it's in red of a loss or an increased cost of $90,000 to $100,000. And then the two curbside programs that we wanted to mention, all of these would be operated by the city. The two curbside programs were semi-automated, so that's buying the carts that the residents would use. They would be dumped with a flipper that would go onto your existing truck, so it's less capital investment, but you would have a curbside program. The cost savings range there from $55,000 to $100,000 a year, and then automated, which is, everybody's heard those one-arm bandits, and that's what Lakewood and many other communities in Cuyahoga County use. It's basically one person can pick up all the trash in the city on one or two routes, and then you'd have a separate truck for recycle. But you wouldn't need the Kubotas, you wouldn't need the extra equipment, but you would have to buy different trucks, so it's more capital investment up front. The cost savings are still pretty good, even with the capital investment. We factor that into our annualized cost to pay back those the purchase of the carts and the trucks. So this gives you a summary. This is a table, was on Appendix D of the final report that kind of summarized all the different options. So my final slide basically is just that value-added service, or value-added reasons why you'd want to go to automated collection. A lot of the communities are doing that. Certainly understand your residents, this would be a big change for them. But you would have a safer, you would be safer for the city and or contractual personnel if you were to contract out without having to lift all that material. By far an increase in recycling because you're changing the collection method and the container size, decreased cost to the city, and allowing the city to eliminate bagged recyclables by using the carts, which would comply with the county ban. Some of the perceived negatives, obviously change. Anytime you change anything, and the mayor's heard me say this a zillion times, for whatever reason, when it comes to trash, it doesn't matter if it's backdoor service or other kinds of service. Whenever you change something with residents, they're going to be upset, or at least a portion of them will be. So dealing with that will be something that, if you were to consider this, that the council members would have to address. Container placement, obviously residents aren't used to using the containers. And so where they would place them, or where they would hold them in their households or their garages or side garages, so next to their garages will all have to be dealt with. And the capital and maintenance expense for equipment, if publicly operated, these one-arm bandits or the automated trucks are more costly trucks, and they're more complicated trucks to maintain. Ultimately, they're more efficient to run, and many communities are doing them. And so with that, That is a presentation in general. Of course, the report is much thicker with much more details. As they say, the devil's in the details. But I wanted to give you a snapshot of the update and the additional analysis that we did, and I'm available to answer any questions. Yes.
Hi, Jim. Thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate this. I had a comment and a question. The comment was, in your experience, the little blue grocery bags, what is the actual volume of those that makes up the recyclables? I know that all the recycling bags I see piled on the corners, you know, when the trucks consolidate them and then pick them up, they're the 13-gallon rubbish size filled with recyclables. I almost never see the little grocery bags. I just wonder how much of that was really a factor.
The actual volume of the plastic in itself is insignificant. It's light density polyethylene. It's very light. It's very it's not going to add to the volume if you take that away, or the weight. The big issue with it is if the bags are covered under the ban, that's one issue. The other, but more importantly, and not to disrespect Cuyahoga County and their ban, but the whole industry is going away from do not bag recyclables. It's a tangler. A lot of the times the material.
I'm aware, yeah.
And it goes through the facility and it doesn't even get recycled. And so everybody in the industry, both private and public, want their recyclables loose. So they have the greatest potential to be diverted and recycled.
Okay. Question. The other question I had was, I know that Pepper Pike uses the same collection method as we do presently.
Correct.
However, the report says that they recycle on average 25% and we only do 7%. If we're doing the same method of putting the recyclables out in collection, how does it differ so greatly? What in your experience would make it so?
I can only speak to what I've seen. We didn't follow their trucks. We're just going off of the data that they report. Their folks may recycle better. They may have different collection capability with how they collect it. Like I mentioned with Shaker Heights, they had that separate bin or compartment in their package where they could.
I was wondering about Pepper Pike because you specifically mentioned them.
And I'm not as exactly familiar with what piece of equipment they're using. We just surveyed their data. We didn't go out and follow their trucks and all that kind of stuff. But certainly they're reporting a much larger volume for sure.
Yeah.
I can also comment on that from talking with a resident who has lived in both Pepper Pike and University Heights, that in Pepper Pike, they have the bin on the front of the Kubota is substantially the same size as the bin on the back of the Kubota. And one of the reasons we have not done that is because we have driveways and backyards with clearances where we wouldn't be able to maneuver a Kubota with an extra large size bin on the front.
Right.
I think,
but like currently though, we're not recycling, and so it doesn't seem to be the size of the Kubota that's impactful. It seems to be how much our residents, myself, and how much we're putting out there.
Well, but what I would also,
what's actually out there. I'm just curious.
Judging by a lot of the phone calls I receive, and this has only ticked up during the pandemic because a lot more people are home to observe what's going on. There are people that call to complain that they observe our service employees throwing recyclables into the back part of the Kubota. That often happens because you have things that don't fit in those front two cans. Either they're full, or in the case of cardboard, you may have cardboard that's been flattened and twined, but they still don't fit into those cans. And once it ends up in the back, it's not getting recycled. It's ending up in the rest of the trash.
Correct.
So it's
now, one of the things we recommended was if you could go to a bigger square rectangular bin on the front of the Kubota that would allow for the bags to go in, as well as the bundled cardboard. Right now you have two 30-gallon, essentially trash cans, but they're plastic, attached to the front of the Kubotas. And so they're the how much wide the capacity of them are only so much, and the throat of those containers are only so big. And so we clearly see that that is a restriction in the recyclables. Now there's differences between Pepper Pike and University Heights demographically and population wise, but clearly that's a limiting factor as to how you collect.
Okay,
with
thank you,
your-
Jim.
Any other questions?
I have some questions.
Okay.
Well,
My
we
name
don't,
is Sherry.
yeah, we don't usually take questions
Oh,
from
okay.
residents at this juncture, but I'm inclined to allow it because I know how important this issue is to so many of our residents. So if you could just state your name and address for the record, so we have it for the record.
Sure. I'm Sherry Sachs. I live at 14474 Summerfield Road. So some observations, maybe questions. Just as a resident of University Heights, I've lived in University Heights on and off since 1980, so a long time. We pay high taxes. It's almost like when we pay the taxes, we think, okay, we get these kind of extra things like the trash pickup at the side door or whatever. So I think that's where you're going to have some pushback from the taxpayer, the average person in University Heights. And while it makes sense to have some cost savings and maybe modify that, maybe the cost savings could be shared with the taxpayer rather than it, somehow think about that. Okay, so it makes
Do you have a
sense.
question for our consultant, Mr. Scora?
I'm sorry.
I was asking if you had a question for Mr. Scora.
So I do. A while ago, my sister lived in a community where there was some sort of cost per, I don't know if it was cost per garbage can, or there was a certain allowance per household, and then above that, there was a cost to the resident. Is that model available? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, some of the private sector contracts, we've worked with a consortium here in Lorain County where I live. And the private contract includes 3 container sizes with different pricing. It's kind of a volume-based, what we call a volume-based or pay-as-you-throw program. It's one of the things I used to say back in the day is trash is the forgotten utility, where we got into this. Now you don't pay, your residents don't pay directly for the service. It's part of their tax base or their property taxes. So in communities where I live in Elyria, I pay every month in my water bill a cost. And the communities where this model or system of different size containers allows for different size households, single family, multi, lots of folks, kids. I'm here with my wife and that's it. So we would generate less than a family of 4. And so if we had that option, which I don't in Elyria, but there are other places, I would choose a smaller trash container for a lesser price. And then of course, recycling is part of the program. So there's an economic incentive for the resident to recycle if they generate less trash because they recycle more. And then folks that don't recycle a lot because maybe they don't like to, they don't want to, they don't have time, whatever the case may be. I mean, it's American, do whatever you want. Then you're going to generate more trash and you should pay more. It's just like electric bill. It's kind of that concept. If you're going to open your windows and turn your air conditioner on, great, but the electric bill's coming. So,
and just as that's coming back to me, that was part of it, the recycling versus, and it was an incentive. People were very careful about, they were a lot more mindful of the trash that's really trash and the recyclables that were the incentive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody on council have any questions for Mr. Scora?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Justin Gould. I don't know if you can see me because the screen share is still on.
no, I
I can see you now.
if you don't need anything from here, I can stop that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, I just wanted to, I had the opportunity to pick up this project in January, and I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Scora, for the work that you and your organization did on the project. I think there's a lot of great information, and I think it underscored during your project and during the question that was just asked in some of the committee meetings that we've had, the importance of this project to the citizens of the city. This is a program, backyard trash pickup, that's quite important to several of them. And I wanted to respond briefly to one of the mayor's comments regarding tomorrow's committee of the whole meeting, just to put any of our citizens who may have heard that comment and be afraid that we are considering a cut at tomorrow's meeting to backyard trash pickup, that I've had the opportunity to speak with Vice Mayor Weiss, and neither she nor I, who chair the service committee, have any intention of there being a cut to backyard trash pickup without first having public hearings in the service committee. That's my commitment to you, and that is from speaking with Vice Mayor Weiss, her commitment to the citizens of the city, that this program that has been with us for such a long period of time will not be stripped away at a committee meeting or hastily brought before council without hearing the advice and input and thoughts of long-term citizens like the one that just spoke. I think we owe you at least that. Thanks so much for your work and for your presentation this evening.
Thank you. And I did want to say briefly, my team member, Erin Olton, is on the call. She's not showing her video, but I wanted to give kudos to her as she helped out quite a bit on this project as well. She wasn't here 11 years ago, but we worked very well together, and I wanted to thank her on behalf of the city. And we appreciate the opportunity to help the city out, because this is a tough decision, and the best way to make any good decision that has good information and lots of it, so you can make the best choice for your city, which is a beautiful city, by the way.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Scora? All right. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Scora. We appreciate the work you've done here. I know it's been the better part of a year that we've been working on this. A lot of excellent information here for the council, the city, the residents to consider when we make our choices with regard to our priorities and how we go about this necessary function here in the city.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thanks, Jeff Porconi, for all his help too. I appreciate it.
Jeff, did you have something you want to say? Kelly, could you unmute Jeff, please?
I just also wanted to thank Jim and GT Environmental for their work. It has been a long study, but I think they did a thorough job, and I'd like to thank them one more time for all his efforts.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like there's one more resident who would like to speak, and since I did allow that to happen, Mr. Outman, did you have a question for Mr. Scora?
Yes, I do. Is it fair to say that your study gave fairly short shrift to the complete privatization of trash collection? It seemed to me, looking at the slides, that most of them had the assumption that the trash collection would continue to be done by the city as opposed to contracted out to private contractors who would then, who might bill individual residents.
Yeah, we did the comparison with private sector because there is data out there. It is very rare, I will tell you, for a city that operates a program like you do to switch it over to the private sector. It has happened. It has happened for big cities. City of Toledo was one in a recent era that did that. But there was no suggestion. We just wanted to show you the differences. And clearly, the private sector, when it's under a competitive process, has better pricing on average. But the analysis we did was for the city to continue, but with a different collection methodology and what that cost could be projected to be.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Scora. All right. Well, then that would appear to conclude this particular agenda item for this evening, unless anybody else on council had another comment they would care to make. Scroll through here and make sure I'm not missing anybody. I don't see any hands. All right, very good.
Sign off.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next item is item B, a motion to approve contract for professional services for Nino Monaco. This is in your packet. Basically, Mr. Monaco has, prior to the retirement of Jim McReynolds, Mr. Monaco has served as the backup certified building officer here in the city. There have been occasions where he has filled in for Mr. McReynolds, whether it was because of scheduling or volume of work or just Mr. Reynolds' unavailability. He has a familiarity with our city. He is an experienced certified building official. He presently serves as the building commissioner in Brooklyn Heights and in Macedonia. He serves on a part-time basis in those two cities. It is the intention here to bring in Mr. Monaco on a part-time basis here as well. In the restructuring of the building and housing department, it is not my intention to make Mr. Monaco the director level position in the department, but for him to serve as with the title of building commissioner so that he can do the things that a building commissioner does do under the ordinances of the city, and also to operate as a certified building official in the primary capacity here for the city rather than in a backup capacity. That would be basically the bulk of it. It's a hybrid schedule here that we have, contemplating a base amount plus a fee schedule for certain tasks. It is not a full-time position, nor is it full-time compensation under this model. I believe Mr. Monaco, is Mr. Monaco here? He was possibly phoning in. Looking
Yes,
to
I
see
am.
if- Oh, yeah, there you are. Yes. Okay, I see you now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Well, thank
So
you
Mr.
very much, Mayor. I really appreciate your input and your compliments. Even though I am not known to a lot of your council member, I'm certainly not unknown to the city. I've been doing inspections for the less than 15 years for your great city, and I also have been a backup commissioner for the last couple commissioners you had there for Mr. Reynolds and even going back to Mr. Mann. So I'm looking forward to helping your community in any way I can. To give you a little background, I worked for Mayfield Heights as an assistant commissioner for 11 years. I worked for Pepper Pike as a building commissioner for 9 years. And as you stated, currently I'm working for the city of Macedonia and Brooklyn Heights. Again, I'm looking forward to the challenge, and anything that I could do to make your department better, I'm all for it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Monaco. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Monaco?
Mayor, I just have I guess a general question. First of all, I want to welcome Mr. Monaco on board.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you. I just had a question. In the interim, since Mr. Monaco has 2 other jobs at this point, what is the flow of work? If there's questions, how the building inspectors, who do they report to? Like, what's going on in the building department right now?
Well, in the building department right now, we have 1 full-time building inspector. The 2 secretaries, they have my phone and they have my phone number and they have my contact. Anytime that a drawing or any questions come in, that's directed to me, I will address it immediately. And I have to tell you that you'd be very pleased as to the turnaround times that we have for new drawings. Everything is going to be greatly improved. As soon as we get drawings in, we're going to review it and we're going to send them right out. Even though I'm not in the building department that often, I'm always available for consultation, phone calls, or comments.
Yes, to put it another way, on a more nuts and bolts level, Mr. Monaco will be available in our building department offices generally on Thursdays, and for consultations generally by phone or by Zoom or what have you, by email throughout the week, and on an appointment basis as needed. And I know he's been at ARB meetings, I believe BZA, or you've sent a designee to BZA this last time, and that would cover a lot of it right there. Mr. Gould.
Mayor, just looking at the fee schedule in this agreement, how many hours a week do you, and on average, do you anticipate Mr. Monaco working?
Well, a lot of it's going to depend on what actually needs to be done. He's only actually going to be in the office on Thursdays, and typically, I believe, you've generally been here like Thursday, a half day generally. Is that right?
Yes, correct. I've been working from 8 to 12 on Thursday, sometimes in the morning. There is times when I need to be there in the afternoon. I also come in as needed to do inspection. I'm certified to do electrical, plumbing, HVAC, footing, foundation. I've been blessed to be, I have all the certificates so I could do all the inspections. And if I have to do some in the after work around 4:30, I will do so. If I have to come back in the evenings, but I don't see spending really too much time in your city. You have two very capable secretaries. They do a tremendous job. You have an inspector who's full-time, and he could do a lot of my legwork. So I don't really see spending, much time in your city.
So the price for the inspection, is that inclusive of all hours necessary to complete the inspection, to schedule, complete, and report on the inspection?
The time that I work in the office, that would be compensated at I think it's $40 an hour. The inspections are going to be $50 an hour, but anything else, any phone calls or the view of the drawings, any consultation, that would be all included in the retainer.
So to complete the inspection, the $50 amount is just for you to go to the site and look at the things, to make the telephone calls, to set up the inspection, to view or to make a report for that inspection. That is all in addition to the $50 and charged at a $40 rate?
That's all included into the $50. When a contractor calls me, they will schedule an inspection with me personally. That's included in there. The inspection, the time to drive to the inspection, that's included in there. The inspection itself, the report generated after that, that's all included in the $50. And that's been their way. That's been their way for the last 5 or 6 years that I've been doing inspections here. So that part has not changed.
So if you show up to the site and spend 2 hours on site and then 3 hours doing the report, it's still just a flat 50.
It's $50 for that. Yes. Yeah, you're getting a deal.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gould. I thought I saw another hand. Was there somebody else who had a question?
That was me, and I think Mr. Gould sort of summed it up. I was just trying to figure out what exactly office work entailed versus non-office work, because you have your flat rate of the $1,800 per month as the non-office. What exactly did you consider office work that was at the hourly rate?
Okay, when I come into the office, I usually come in to schedule inspections. Number one, that would be a priority. But then there's drawings, there's new houses that come in that I have to review. I'm not going to send those out to a plan examiner who's going to charge you a certain amount of money, for just reviewing those drawings. I will review myself. A lot of the times I would take a lot of those drawings home myself. To review and to comment on it, and to send back to the architect or to the homeowner or whoever. So that part of the work that I take home, that would be charged it,
Okay, so just because you're in the office on Thursdays, you would still be doing office work remotely on other days of the week, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and so what would be considered non-office work or non-inspection work that the flat retainer covers?
There would be, if we get a drawings that it needs to be reviewed, and I mean, we just received one for the Dolan's hall at John Carroll. Now this thing was probably 100 pages long. I have to take that drawings, and I can't spend enough time at the office to review that. So I would have to take that drawings home with me. I have to spend some evening to look and study that drawing, and that would be charged at an extra fee at the $40 an hour rate.
Okay, but what I'm asking, okay, so yeah, so that's charged at an hourly rate for office time, even though you're doing it remotely. What I'm asking is, what work is not charged hourly, as to why we should be paying $1,800 a month flat retainer fee? What do we get out of that you're not charging hourly for?
Well, number one, you get out of that, you have all my certificates. Your building department is going to require a building commissioner who has all the certificates. You need to have, again, a plumbing certificate. You have to have a class 1, class 3, electrical, and HVAC. So you have to have one on staff by the state of Ohio who's certified to do all those. Previously you had Jim McReynolds. He did not have the plumbing certificate, so you had to have me or somebody else fill in for that. So you pay me to bring those certificates, number one, and also to to get all the phone calls that I'm getting, to get all the emails that I'm getting. Those are all included in the fees.
Well, I would think that the certificates are baked into the hourly rate, but okay, so go back to the phone calls and emails. So you would not be putting on your time card 2 hours spent doing emails yesterday, correct? Or would that be considered office time, 2 hours at $40 an hour?
You would not be charged for that.
Okay, so you reviewing the documents and all the drawings is considered office time, but any clerical work that you need to do would not be charged office time.
That's correct. There's a lot of phone calls, there's a lot of emails, there's a lot of consultation, a lot of phone calls from the residents. That would be too difficult to track the time. So all that would be included into the retainer.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gould.
And Mayor, sorry, help me understand how the certificates would be used at this time. I know because of COVID, we have some changes in the way that the city's departments are running. Is there a need for these certificates right now in order to interact with the citizens with the approval process, the permitting process?
I can answer that question.
Right, these are all essential functions. None of these things have changed, but go ahead, Mr. Monaco.
Yes, according to the state of Ohio, every certified building department must have on its staff a building commissioner, must have a plumbing inspector, electrical inspector, and class 1 and a class 3 inspector. Not only one, but also has to have a backup to the building commissioner. And unfortunately, that's state law. Every single city must have a building commissioner and an assistant building commissioner. So right now, what we did, we kind of reversed the roles. We still kept Jim McReynolds in as a backup, and I am the interim commissioner at this time. But
so
you
the
have to
idea
have,
that you would come in and Mayor, is the idea that anyone else that was on payroll drop off at that point once the professional service agreement was in?
I'm sorry, what was that, Councilman Gould?
Is the idea then, if we have a backup and an interim, is the idea that because the interim, Mr. Monaco, would have all of the necessary certificates for us to operate as a full department, that anybody else who was being held, is somebody else being held, is Mr. McReynolds still being paid, I guess is my question. And if so, would he drop off of payroll because we now have this professional
Yeah,
service?
Right. Mr. McReynolds retired from the city at the beginning of April. He has not been on our payroll since then.
Okay, I wasn't sure if he was being held on for reporting reasons
Oh,
because
no. No, no. We did I believe we have filed an interim transition here for that.
Okay.
Yes. And well, you see, Mr. Monaco was already the backup. So, the state was aware of that. And then in turn, we have made Mr. McReynolds with his consent the backup. He's happy to help us out, even though he's retired. And I don't want to bother him unnecessarily. I want him to enjoy his retirement, but at the same time, he is available if we need him. And it certainly is familiar with the city. So.
Appreciate it.
Mhm. But he would only be paid on a per task basis. And I don't think we've had him do anything since he's left in April. So he's done nothing that I'm aware of offhand.
He is not.
And you have not? No, okay. I didn't think so.
No.
Mhm. Okay.
Mayor,
Yes, Mrs. Purdy.
thank you. Mr. Monaco,
Yes.
you can see how careful we are and how serious we are and how deliberately we check into things and ask questions. I don't have a question for you. I just want to thank you for stepping in and helping us out and being willing to do this because we have to have this service. So I just want to say, as the Vice Mayor did, welcome and thank you.
Well, what I like to tell you that I was in your shoes. I was a councilman in Mayfield Heights for 6 years. So I was on both sides of the alley, and I can really appreciate what you're doing. You're doing your homework. You are representing your people well, and it's a welcome side. So thank you.
Well, we're certainly happy that you are willing to serve for the city of University Heights in this capacity.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mayor. Appreciate it.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Monaco? If not, is there a motion to approve the contract for professional services for Nino Monaco?
Mayor, I'll make that motion to approve.
Very good. Motion to approve by Mrs. Pardee. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mayor.
Second, thank you. Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll on the motion?
I'm listening.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mrs. Weiss, Mr. Gould,
Aye.
Mr. Rock.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Mr. Monaco, before you go, normally we would do this in person. If we were all in person, I would meet you down at the front of the room and do this. But and I'll have the paper for you to sign when you're in on Thursday. But if you wouldn't mind, just for the sake of normalcy here at our council meeting, if you wouldn't mind raising your right hand and repeating after me. I state your name.
I, Nino Monaco,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
to support the Constitution
to support the Constitution
and laws
and laws
of the United States of America,
of the United States of America,
the Constitution
the Constitution
and laws
and laws
of the State of Ohio,
of the State of Ohio,
and the Charter
and the Charter
and ordinances
and the ordinances
of the City of University Heights,
of the City of University Heights,
to the best of my ability
to the best of my ability
as Building Commissioner
as Building Commissioner
of the City of University Heights.
of the City of University Heights.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations and welcome aboard, sir.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I appreciate it. Thank you, Council.
I'd shake your hand if I could get in there.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Next item on the agenda is item C, which is the approval recommendation from Planning Commission for the passage of ordinance 2020-09, rezoning certain parcels located on Warrensville Center Road, permanent parcel numbers 722-10-028 and 722-10-048 from Automobile Parking District U3 to Local Retail District or U7. And this is on second reading. Mrs. Drucker, you have the floor.
It might be easier if I can share my screen here to show the parcels.
Yes, yes, Mrs. Thomas, will
I
you,
could-
Mrs. Drucker, a co-host here, so she may do that.
Yeah, Justin.
You're clear, Mrs. Drucker.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so this was brought to council back in February, and then it ultimately was referred to planning, and this was a housekeeping issue that will assist in clarifying the city's zoning map. And when reviewing the zoning map, it was identified that the parcels we're talking about here are 722-10028, and then this little square right here is 722-10048. So you can't read the number, but that's what this one is.
Yeah, can other people see her screen? I can't see her.
No.
Can't see the screen?
Yeah, no, yeah, nothing changed here. We're still in Brady Bunch of view. I don't know.
Hold on, let's see. How about
There
here?
you go. Here it
Can
comes.
everyone
All
see?
right.
There we go.
There it is.
Okay.
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 Very good.
So the two parcels we're referring to is 722-10028, and this one right here is 722-01-048. This is the parking lot that is behind the stores such as Flowerville, Cut Above, Geraci's, and then it stops. So these two parcels are currently zoned U3. The stores, the retail centers that they serve are zoned U7, which is the appropriate zoning for that site. So we were looking to change the U3 to U7, and so that then ultimately the goal down with planning would be once we clear up the U3 on our zoning map, it's then ultimately about consolidating properties that are owned under common ownership. So this is a process we've been going through, and this change, it's as I said, it's a proactive measure, and it would match the current use of the retail district. It would help prevent any future permitting or approval delays that result from the current zoning, and it's simply a housekeeping issue to help assist in clarifying the city's zoning map.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Drucker. Are there any questions for Mrs. Drucker? Okay, I would note that the Planning Commission did approve of this. So what's before us is an approval of the recommendation for passage. If there's no questions, is there a motion to approve the recommendation Planning Commission on agenda item C?
Mayor, if I may, just to clarify that motion,
yeah. Go ahead, Mr.
the Planning Commission recommends approval of the ordinance. So what council is considering tonight is the actual approval of the ordinance, which would then result in a change to the zoning code. I mean, to the zoning map.
Right. So I guess the better way of putting that would be, is there a motion to approve ordinance 2020-09?
Correct.
I'll make a motion, Mayor.
Very good. Was that Mrs. Weiss?
Yeah.
Very good. There's a motion by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion on the motion? All right, if there is none, then Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Langfield,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mrs. Weiss,
Yeah, aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Next is item D. Approval of recommendation from Planning Commission for the passage of ordinance 2020-10, rezoning a certain parcel located on John Carroll Boulevard as follows. Permanent parcel number 721-06-008 from U7 and U3 to local retail district or U7. This is on second reading. Mrs. Drucker, you have the floor.
Yes, by the diagram here, this is the parcel number we were looking at, 721-06-008. And in looking to clarify the zoning map, this property was consolidated from 2 parcels down to 1. However, the single parcel has 2 zoning districts right now assigned to it, U7 and U3. U7 would be the correct zoning, so we would like to simply approve the recommendation from the Planning Commission to rezone this parcel from U7 and U3 to just U7. This will not change the permitted uses of the property as is currently allowed, nor would it impact the day-to-day operations of the businesses that currently occupy that building. And just for the last item, this one and the next 2, all property owners had been notified, and anyone with questions had talked to me. I had the opportunity to discuss with them. So all property owners are aware of all of these changes as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Drucker. Are there any questions for Mrs. Drucker? If there are no questions, is there a motion?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the passage of ordinance 2020-10.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Blankfeld to approve the yes, to adopt ordinance 2020-10, I think would be, yes. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, second by Mrs. Berry. Any discussion on this motion? Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, did anybody hear Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
There she is. Aye, she says.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Next item is item E, which is approval of recommendation from Planning Commission for the passage of ordinance 2020-11, rezoning certain parcels located on Warrensville Center Road, permanent parcel number 721-02-027, and 721-02-028 from automobile parking district U3 to local retail district or U7. This is on second reading. Mrs. Drucker, you have the floor.
Thank you. These parcels are on the north side of Silsbee and east side of Warrensville Center Road, right here, 721-02-028. And then this little square is 721-02-027. Similar to the first example, this serves as a parking lot to the retail that's located in front of it, which stretches from Bialys down to Rascal House. We'd like to change the U3 zoning to U7 to match the retail district. And again, this would be helping a housekeeping issue that would help clarify the city zones.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Drucker. Are there any questions for Mrs. Drucker? If not, is there a motion?
Mayor, I'll make the motion.
Very good. Motion by Mrs. Pardee. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Did you want to state it? Okay, very good.
No, thank you.
Thank you. We had the motion to approve ordinance 2020-11 by Mrs. Pardee. Is there a second?
Mayor, I'll second.
Second by Mr. Gould. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld. Mrs. Berry.
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee.
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mr. Rock.
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. This brings us to item F, approval of recommendation from Planning Commission for the passage of ordinance 2020-12, rezoning a certain parcel located on Warrensville Center Road as follows. Permanent parcel number 722-10-023 from U7 and U3, the local retail district, or U7. This is on second reading. Mrs. Drucker, you have the floor.
We are back across Warrensville Center Road again. We are talking about this parcel right here that is in this L shape. This is 722-10-023. This was a property that was consolidated from two parcels to one. Although it was consolidated and is recorded at the county level, it was not properly amended on the city's zoning map, and it still currently is designated as both U7 and U3. Therefore, we would like to remove the U3 zoning and apply just the U7 zoning. This would change the permitted uses of the property as currently allowed or impact the day-to-day operations of the business that currently occupies the building. This is another housekeeping issue to help clarify the city zoning map.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Drucker. Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Drucker? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion?
So moved, Mayor.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Weiss for passage of ordinance 2020-12. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mayor.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld.
Aye.
Mrs. Berry.
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee.
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mr. Rock.
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good.
Excuse me,
Motion.
Mayor, and Councilman Gould, if you can keep my screen on, because I know the next issue, I know based on our director's meeting, they wanted to have that displayed as well. Since I have the screen already up, I could just scroll down to that.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Drucker. Thank you.
But Joe Chuney will have to tell me if this is what he wants.
All right. Well, what I'll do is I'll announce the agenda item, give the floor to Mr. Chuney, and if there's
Okay.
something, then I'm sure he
And
will.
Mayor, I'll recuse myself on this agenda item.
Okay, Mrs. Thomas, will you note that Mr. Rock recuses himself on this agenda item, please, for the record? Okay, this item on the agenda is item G, approval of recommendation from Planning Commission for the lot split and consolidation of parcel 721-20-047, which is 4391 University Parkway, and 721-20-049, which is 4411 University Parkway. Mr. Chuney, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Two homeowners on University Parkway would like to move their property line. The Shaffrons, which is parcel A on the drawing there, are giving 35 feet to the Waxman property, which is shaded there. That's the part that's going to be transferred over. They have a desire to do it. We have checked it. This plat meets all city and county standards. We have also checked parcel A since it did become smaller. We had made sure that they do not have too much land coverage with their building, and they do not. There is official calculations in the record. So we are recommending a Planning Commission approve this, and I'm recommending approval of this lot split and consolidation.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chuney. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Chuney? Mrs. Weiss.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. They're gifting it to them or they're selling it?
I am not privy to that information. I mean, they do have to file something with the county when they file the plat, and in there they tell if there's if it is a sale of some kind, there is sales tax to pay. So the county will certainly get their share, and that'll be known at that time. I am not privy to that information.
Okay, and does this have any bearing on, like, are any of these homes for sale, or it's just they're requesting it? And I've just never seen this come before the city before, where somebody's splitting pieces of their property up. That's all.
And they both, meet the, there's no variances required. I mean, they still meet all the zoning for land coverage and things like that. And one owner wants to give property to the other. I assume they talked, and they worked out a deal,
Okay.
I don't know if
thank
they're
you.
going to sell the house or not. I don't have that. I'm not privy to that information either.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Mr. Gould.
Just kind of parsing as to why as well, to follow Vice Mayor Weiss. Maybe the law director or mayor, are you aware of any applications of the party receiving the land that were disallowed that would be now allowed because of the additional space? So I think I see that a larger portion of this property that's receiving the land is covered by a home than is the granting property. Perhaps a patio or a pool or some other ground coverage which would have been disallowed by the Planning Commission, which could now be built because there's additional property as part of that. Are we aware of any such applications?
I'm not aware of any such application. I think that certainly the scenario you're describing is plausible, that the party receiving the land may desire to receive it so that they don't have to make a request for a variance, or if they do need a variance, need a smaller variance. But in any event, any new development on either property will be subject to our zoning code and reviewed by our building department. And if variances are needed, the city will retain its discretion at the board level to grant or deny those variances.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McConville. I would also join you, Mr. McConville, in saying that I'm not aware of any application or any particular motivation behind this. Just not privy to.
Thank you to you both.
I guess I would, for just for purposes of making sure that council understands this, you have the right to cause the applicant to appear before you if that's material to you. I think the Planning Commission, if I might speak for them, having attended the meeting, felt that because both properties, both before and after the transaction, would be compliant with our zoning code, they did not see a planning issue that concerned them. And as I mentioned before, any new construction is going to be subject to the analysis of the building department, and if variances are needed, then referral to the Board of Zoning Appeals. That's true today without the transaction having occurred. So given those circumstances, the Planning Commission was satisfied with recommending approval. If council has concerns about the underlying transaction or the underlying motivation, it would have the right to ask the applicant to come before them.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McConville. I don't believe the applicant has logged into this Zoom call. Just trying to scroll through here. I don't see. Oh,
I'm there.
Oh, the applicant is here. Yes. Would anybody like to hear from the applicant? Because the applicant is present.
Yeah, if they're willing to discuss with any future plans or the kind of motivation behind the transfer, I would be interested to know more.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gould. Would the applicant care to address the council at this point?
He's muted.
Kelly, you have to unmute Joseph's iPad.
Is that okay? Am I
Now we
okay
can.
now?
There we go.
Okay. The site that where our home is built was developed by my uncle about in 1954. And the lot size, because he was the builder, is large. And we have a long-standing relationship with the Waxman family, and it was simply felt that we would like at this point to work together to figure out what is the best future and the safest future for that property. And that's the reason we've applied.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. And the floor is open. Is there anybody on council who has a comment, a question, or would like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion for approval.
Very good. We have a motion to approve by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll take Mr. Gould. Thank you. All right. A second by Mr. Gould. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Langfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda is item H, approval of ordinance 2020-25 to obtain funding from the state of Ohio pursuant to Senate Bill 310 on emergency. As the council is likely aware, but to put it on the record for the public as well, pursuant to, through the CARES Act, there is money that has been directed by the federal government to the state for distribution to local governments. No government that governs a population of under $500,000 gets money directly from the CARES Act, but there is through Senate Bill 310 $1.2 billion of federal financial aid, and with that 350 million is proposed to go to the local government funds of various municipalities and local government entities here in the state of Ohio. And that $370,000 is the proposed and designated amount to go to the city of University Heights for COVID-19 expenses. It has been suggested to us that it would be appropriate to pass an ordinance to obtain the funding from the state of Ohio. The time that we put this together, we were of the belief that Senate Bill 310 would have received House consideration potentially at this point. House has not yet voted on this. It might not be a bad idea to go ahead and pass this in anticipation of the House passage. At the same time, this is also something that we could simply hear on first reading and then take up at the next meeting in order to make sure that we have done what we should do to take advantage of money that would be coming to the city of University Heights through the local government fund for COVID-19 and related expenses. Mr. McConville, is there anything you'd care to add to that?
That pretty much sums it up. It has not yet been approved by the House. So, as one of the city directors stated this morning, you never know what's going to happen in the House. There could be changes. If we were to pass this tonight and there were material changes to the bill that occurred in the House, then we would come back before you to ask for another approval. But if there are not changes in the House, then we would, be able to immediately send our past legislation to the county auditor's office and the director of the Ohio Office of Budget and Management. and receive the funds allocated to us. The Senate bill itself is fairly simple. I don't see there being a lot of room for there to be changes. I mean, they're allocating money that's coming from the CARES Act, but again, we won't know for sure until the House is done.
Okay.
Has considered it.
All right, Mr. Kennedy, is there a difference to you that you find meaningful between if the House were to pass it this week, and we've already passed this ordinance, to be able to take advantage of this money versus waiting to the next meeting to consider this? Is there any particular advantage that you're aware of?
No, I just, as Luke said, if things changed, we would have to amend the legislation. I just want to get a piece of legislation down to the County Budget Commission as soon as possible, so we get on the front end and don't run into any complications later down the line. So I think we're safe passing it, as long as everybody knows if it changes substantially, to the degree the law director wants to get it amended, then we'd have to do that at a subsequent meeting.
All right. Well, I think there's something to be said for going in, with eyes open that this may give us what we need, or we may need to change it later. If we don't vote on something and then this would have sufficed, then we have to wait. Mrs. Weiss, you look like you raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this money, if it's passed, is tagged for University Heights. So it's not, it just means that we'll get it sooner if we pass it now, correct?
I think that's correct.
That's correct.
Yeah, I believe.
Okay, so I just know, and I know that Mrs. Pardee also is very aware that these, that government legislation can change drastically. I'd rather have it, I'd feel more comfortable to have it on first reading as opposed to passing it, because if there is something significant, we're going to have to anyways, in 2 weeks amend it. But that's my opinion. I can go either way. I just feel that I've seen so many changes in legislation over the last 2 months that I don't think it's an emergency, just first reading.
Yes, and I'll admit, when we put this together last week, we were hopeful that that it was possible the House might have moved at this point. So we wanted to make sure it was on the agenda and ready to go if appropriate. So, Mr. McConville, if we decide to do this on first reading, is there anything we have to do to move to do that?
No,
I did.
There isn't any official step we would take, and just to note for the record, I have no objection to that whatsoever.
Me neither.
The bill has not passed the House, so.
Okay. Well, then, if there is no motion, I will simply, as the chair here, treat this as a first reading, and unless anybody else has anything they'd like to say about it, we will consider this first reading had, and we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. How does that sound? Seeing no objection. Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is item I. Approval of ordinance 2020-26 and excuse me. Yes. Item I, approval of ordinance 2020-26 enacting codified ordinance chapter 821 entitled Discrimination Prohibitions in Employment and Public Accommodations in order to establish anti-discrimination ordinances, regulations, procedures, and standards consistent with the Cuyahoga County anti-discrimination law in employment and public accommodations. This is on first reading. I suppose I should call on Councilman Gould, who I know was a motivating and moving actor behind the introduction of this legislation. Councilman Gould, would you like the floor?
Thank you, Mayor. One moment. Let me see if I can share my screen. I think I can. Thank you for the introduction, Mayor. I know that you were present in 2018 when the Cuyahoga County Council passed its ordinance protecting members of the LGBT community from employment discrimination. This mirrors the efforts of our neighbor community, specifically Shaker Heights, in codifying the protections against certain protected classes from employment-based discrimination. I don't know, let's see if it's actually started to share yet. It hasn't, it's still connecting to share it now. But essentially, the ordinance protects individuals from discrimination in employment and public accommodations based upon race, color, religion, military status, national origin, disability, age, ancestry, family status, sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity or expression. And it allows the city to receive complaints on behalf of individuals who believe that they have been discriminated in violation of that section and as specified in this ordinance, to make complaints to the city and for the city to refer those out to various bodies. Those are outlined in section 82109, those being the Cuyahoga County Human Rights Commission, the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, OCRC, or the U.S. Equal Employment and Opportunities Commission, the EEOC, to determine the appropriate remedy, including investigation, review, and enforcement. There were two material changes that I wanted to highlight for the law director and for members of council who may have seen earlier versions of this. And those were in section 821.03, prohibited discriminatory practices in employment. Subparagraph D was changed just to add, this is a section that prevents an employer, employment agency, or labor organization from publishing or circulating or causing to be published or circulating any notice or advertisement related to employment or membership which indicates a preference, limitation, specification based on, or discrimination based on the certain protected classes that I've already specified. And after conversations with Councilwoman Pardee, we've added a clarification that except as permitted by section 821.08 of the chapter or otherwise provided by law. And 821.08 is simply a section which allows for affirmative action or other recruitment practices that promote diversity. So this is we're just simply referencing down to say that a preference based to promote diversity is not precluded by the ordinance. And the final one was simply a typographical error that was caught by the mayor. That was in 821.04, exemptions from from prohibitions in employment. And that made reference to a different section. We've just added 821.03 shall not apply to a religious corporation, association, educational institution, or society with respect to the employment of individuals of a particular religion or to perform work connected with the carrying out by that religious corporation, association, educational institution, or society of religious activities. So again, this is really codifying in our own ordinance the protections afforded to these various protected classes in federal, state, and local, meaning county law, and referring to the various entities established by the federal, state, and county laws for enforcement as provided by those laws. I've spoken to each member of council about this ordinance. I know that it's been important to several of them, all of them in individual ways. I'm so grateful for my council colleagues and for the mayor for joining me in presenting this as a whole. It's not every time that we have an ordinance that every member of council and the mayor signs on to present this. Last summer, we flew for the first time the LGBT pride flag for the month of June. And I'm grateful to be a member of a council and a citizen of a community whose leaders would gather together to send the affirmative message that University Heights is a community for every citizen and is welcoming to every person who would want to come here to live, to thrive, and to work. So thank you so much, Mayor, for the floor, and for my council colleagues for considering this on first reading. Mayor, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Gould. Is there anybody else who would care to comment on the proposed ordinance at this time, given the number of sponsors? And there are probably things that people want to say.
Yes, Mayor. I'll just echo what Councilman Gould was saying. And as we're about to enter June, which is Pride Month. Historically, it's Pride Month, and this will be on second reading in the month of June, and hopefully will pass by my colleagues. And I'm pretty sure it will, as everybody has co-sponsored this ordinance, which is very unusual. We don't have that very often where the entire council does co-sponsor an ordinance. This is very exciting. You know, it is 2020 and we still live in a country where you can be fired from your job simply for who you are. And that will not be the case here in University Heights, that we will stand behind everybody depending on any type of diversity that this person could have, whether it be a protected class or, in this case, sexual identity and sexual orientation, which are not protected classes. They will be protected here as well. So I'm very excited that our city is progressive to pass this ordinance. Well, it is on first reading, but we'll hopefully pass it in the next meeting.
Okay, very good. Mrs. Blankfeld, you have the floor.
I would like to echo what my colleagues, Mr. Gould and Mr. Rock, have expressed in our household. This is a very important matter. I spoke publicly about it last year when we flew the pride flag, and certainly while campaigning was delighted in what my understanding of what our diversity levels are in this community, which are quite vast. And this is an important thing, I think, because yes, while it is covered by other legislation on, other levels, I think it's backing up what we say in a more meaningful way. We fly the pride flag and we speak of the various kinds of diversity that we support in this community, but I'm proud to be among my colleagues that are sponsoring this legislation.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Blankfeld. Mrs. Purdy.
Thank you, Mayor. I too am proud that all of my colleagues and you have joined together. I'm proud that this will be legislation in our city. I'm proud that it finally come forward. But I also want to thank Councilman Gould, because he is the council person who pulled this together, identified the legislation, did the work on it, talked with all his colleagues, answered all the questions, and has gotten this to happen. So thank you to Councilman Gould also.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Purdy. Is there anyone else who would care to speak at this point? Well, I'll take a moment. When I ran for this office in 2017, there were a number of things I ran on, and there were a number of positions I took that I've been happy to bring to fruition here in the city of University Heights, and this is one of them. This is an ordinance that I have supported during the campaign. I spoke in favor of bringing about an ordinance exactly like this one. When the council considered and then ultimately passed the ordinance, as Mr. Gould had referenced earlier, on the county level, I was present for that vote. I was among the members of the public who spoke in favor of the county doing it. This is something that should be the law of the United States of America. This is something that should be the law of the state of Ohio. It is the law of Cuyahoga County, and it will soon be the law of the city of University Heights. And that is something that we should all be very proud of. And I look forward to our being able to take this vote. University Heights is an inclusive community. It's a diverse community, and it is a welcoming community. And this is a statement of our values. It is a statement of what matters. And I am delighted that every elected official of this body and of this city is a part of this now. It's a wonderful statement of collaboration, power, and yes, I do thank Mr. Gould for his role in putting all this together. This is something that is very special and very important, and something that I hope you'll all be remembered for. Thank you. Is there anything else that anybody would care to say at this first reading of ordinance 2020-26? There will be another opportunity. If not, let me just scroll through and make sure I haven't missed anybody. If not, then we will consider this first reading had. And we will then move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item J. Motion authorizing the mayor to enter into a 2020 preventative maintenance program with Cuyahoga County Department of Public Works with a reimbursable cost for the year 2020 in an amount not to exceed $78,500. Mr. Chuney, would you address the council on this item?
Yes, Mayor. Back in February of 2020, you received a letter from County Executive Armin Budish stating that they were granting us the $78,500 for crack sealing and for restriping of Warrensville Center Road with the thermoplastic material versus a water-based paint. This is for, it's a reimbursement program. It's for the material costs of those items. And in order to receive those items, you have to enter into an agreement with the county for this preventative maintenance reimbursement program. I recommend approval, subject to approval by the law director that the agreement is in order.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chuney. Mr. McConville, is there anything you care to add at this point? You're muted, Mr. McConville.
No, Mayor, nothing further from me.
Oh, very good. Any questions for Mr. Chuney? Any comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve item J.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item J by Mr. Rock. Is there a second?
Mayor, I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mrs. Weiss. I got you. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Next item is item K, motion authorizing the mayor to purchase personal protection equipment, PPE, the amount of $10,168, and self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBA, the amount of $73,743.94 from MES Warren fire equipment in an amount not to exceed $84,000. Chief Perko, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. This request is for our ongoing safety equipment and replacement program. This was discussed at the finance committee meetings during the budgetary process and approved in the budget for capital items. The turnout gear, which is the PPE, it's our structural firefighting turnout gear. It has a life expectancy of 10 years. We have a number of sets that are expired this year, and this is to replace those sets, which will last then an additional 10 years. The SCBA is the self-contained breathing apparatus. Those have a life expectancy of 15 years. They're also bound by the DOT. All the specifications are up to the current standards. No major overhaul to the specifications coincides with the rest of our current fleet of equipment that we have. Just brings everything that's outdated into date and into spec. MES has it all on state bid, and this is under just under the amount approved for capital purchases this year for this equipment specifically.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chief Perko. Mrs. Weiss.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I was just wondering, I had a question for the finance director. Do we have any clarification on the COVID dollars from the county on if safety equipment is allowable?
I have not got something official. I'm still waiting on that, but the way it was conveyed to me that as long as the safety equipment can be reasonably identified as being a result of the pandemic, then it would qualify. I'm just waiting to get something more confirmed in writing than the conversation that I had. But I would expect that should be coming in the next couple of days.
Okay, so Chief Perko, is that something that you think would fall under what the director just said?
I mean, really, the reason we're replacing it is due to its expiration this year. I mean, that's the main reason.
What's the date of the expiration of the equipment?
I would have to look up the exact month for you. The air cylinders have already expired. They've been removed from service. And the turnout gear, I believe, is this month or next.
And I just want to chime in and say I understand Chief Perko's hesitation because the turnout gear and the SCBA apparati are absolutely necessary, and they have a shelf life, so they expire and have to be replaced every so often. So, one of the questions that is raised in my mind is what kind of representations, if any, an applicant is making, in connection with claiming reimbursement dollars. The city is going to need to replace this equipment no matter what. The city will have potential liability issues if we send, firefighters into a structure or a situation with expired equipment. And so that's why I think you're hearing the difficulty there.
Yeah, I was not at all suggesting that we shouldn't purchase these items. I just was wondering if COVID funds were allowable, then that's kind of a no-brainer. But of course we need to equip our firefighters with their gear.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Mr. Gould.
Kind of building off of what Vice Mayor Weiss said, Chief Perko, I understand that these are items that are being replaced in the ordinary course of our business, of the operation of our city. If, however, in your research or looking at the inventory that we have, if there are items that you could upgrade the equipment to, I'm sorry, I don't know your equipment, the technical details of your equipment well enough. But for instance, if on the turnout gear, the breathing apparatuses could be retrofitted with N99 or N95 capabilities, that would make them even more protective against certain things that your firefighters and medics are being exposed to. The turnout gear, I know that a while ago, we I think it was last year, council approved a new set of washing machine for your turnout gear. If there was and that included, I believe, byproducts and blood, but if there were certain chemicals or things that would be able to be used to wash that turnout gear against viruses and disinfect it, those are the type of things that I don't know if it was specifically what Vice Mayor Weiss was speaking about, but if there are additional things that can be purchased by the city to help protect your officers, I just want to be aware of those so that we can look to the COVID money to cover that additional expense that may go above and beyond the expenditures in the ordinary course of operation.
Absolutely. We'll definitely make sure that we stay diligent to check all those available resources to us.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And Mayor, if I could just clarify my remarks.
Yes.
I did not mean to imply that council wouldn't support the purchase of these items. It's more that I just want to make sure that the city isn't having anyone make a representation, that's improper when we know that these particular items of equipment, have to be replaced.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Mr. McConville.
Mayor, that's
Mr. Kennedy. Yeah.
me and the state are working out the details on how the distribution process goes, what the criteria is. I think everything's just happening so fast. There's some things that have been not formalized to the extent that would give us clear-cut answers. That's what I'm hoping to get in the very near future. Again, remember the folks of the county are working on a limited schedule. I think they're just in the process of reopening their building, so they've had a limited work staff. But if we can get it to qualify, I'll bring that back to council to explain. If not, I'll also give you the reasons why.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mrs. Purdy.
Thank you, Mayor. For the finance director, with the information you've gotten on COVID to date, everything that we've seen in our capacity as our governmental unit is that, expenses retroactive to March 13th, the date of the declared federal emergency, are reimbursable. So are these funds also that would be reimbursable in that manner? If you were to go out, if we approve this tonight, the chief buys his equipment now, but you get the funds later, could you reimburse for those purchases and then free up these funds?
Yes, I believe so. I don't think anything's contingent on actually getting this specific money. The money is there to support purchases made either in the future or in the past on behalf of the city with city funds to get reimbursed. So,
so if the question is a timing issue and when would we get the funds, we can still pay for that equipment even if we buy it now. We're leaving the general fund and paying with the COVID funds.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
So in that manner, I would make a motion to approve purchasing these items.
Okay, very good. We have a motion by Mrs. Pardee to authorize the mayor to purchase personal protection equipment and self-contained breathing apparatus in an amount not to exceed $84,000. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mrs. Berry. Any further discussion or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Yes. Next is item L, motion to approve invoice from American Safe and Vault Service for City Hall touchless door video intercom entry system in an amount not to exceed $18,726. I would note that items L, M, N, O, and P are all American Safe and Vault Service. And also, to be very clear, while it says to approve invoice, these are not things that have actually been purchased or installed yet. These are really more appropriately quotes for these items. And I'll start myself in addressing this. All these items are a direct result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and they are being sought for City Hall, for the building department, and for the fire department to upgrade the entrances to these buildings so as to regulate the people, regulate the ability to get people in and out of these buildings once we're ready to reopen them, probably on an appointment basis. This will get the buildings available and ready for that. Looking first at this immediate item, the item L with the touchless doors, given the nature of the City Hall building, we have in the past just had the building doors open to the public. Since March, around the time of the declaration of emergency, the City Hall building was closed to the public. However, we are hopeful that we will at some point reopen, but in the interim, that there would be a period of time where we would allow people in for meetings on an appointment basis. What this system would allow for City Hall would be, presently, we have a keyless entry on the door, which also is operated by a key fob that certain employees have, that allow the door to remain locked, but that it opens briefly when you enter the code or when you use the key fob. This way, and that was installed by American Safe and Vault Service as well. This additional equipment is equipment that will work with the equipment that already exists and build upon the existing system, so that from inside City Hall, one can see who is at the door when the doorbell has been rung. Have them state their business if that is unknown, and then be able to buzz them in remotely from within the building. That could be done by my assistant Rachel. That could be done by Dennis if directly if he wanted to, or by Kelly, or in fact by myself. Really, anybody would be able to have a browser window, see who's there, and as appropriate, be able to open the City Hall door for someone who is there. And because it's a touchless door, the way that would work is not only would it buzz the door itself would actually open, thus minimizing the contact with the surface of the handle and knob of the door. Similarly, we would install a similar system for building department, but because of the doorways that are on the building department house, it doesn't lend itself to the touchless door system, but it would allow the other aspects of the system where Ruth and Dee or others in the building department would be able to see who's at the door and buzz them in, potentially on an appointment basis or some other basis, in order to ensure that we regulate the number of people that come into the building, and so on. Same thing as well with the fire department administrative office door, and then also ultimately there's an improvement here to exercise building door for the fire department, which I'm sure Chief Perko can more fully elaborate on. That's item P. But because there are several items here that when taken in their total with the same vendor do well exceed my spending authority, I did not want it to be said, I did not want to say that these various items were separate and discrete items. And certainly the touchless system coming in at over $18,000 is one that also is not by itself something that exceeds my spending authority. But to be very clear, these are all things that we are looking to do strictly because of the COVID-19 pandemic. They are all things that we are looking to do and looking to have installed prior to as part of the transition of being able to open to the public again, and also controlling the extent to which we let people in, depending on conditions as they permit. So I'm hopeful that this has explains the rationale for what we're doing and what we're proposing. And when it comes to item L especially, but then we're going to work our way through the items. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mayor, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
So has there been a director's meeting on what possible needs for the COVID money throughout the organization?
I wouldn't say that we've had quite that meeting with quite that topic.
I'm just concerned because, this is $38,000 and, it's buildings, we're planning before COVID started, and hopefully in the next, month or two, we'll start again. But we were planning on having a strategic plan, right? 1 year, short term, long term, 5 years, 10 years. We don't know exactly what we're going to do with these buildings. I know from previous organizations that I've worked with that you can install, I don't know the correct terms, but a buzzer that can, with a camera, so you can see somebody, you can buzz them in on existing doors. You don't need new doors to do that. I'm also concerned that I don't think that touchless doors is a good use of COVID money if we can do that in an easier way. I know that the building department and I don't know about the fire department entrance, but I know about the building department and the city hall. I think that's if we can do that on existing doors, that's fine. I don't see this even translating into COVID money just because you don't touch the door. I have a hard time associating that with the COVID money.
All right, Mr. Gould.
The idea of a meeting with the directors and having a better understanding of the holistic plan that you have for the use of the COVID money, I think would be helpful in my determination. Slightly different to Vice Mayor Weiss, I could see how if there was a reduction in the return of the workforce to in-person working, so that you might have one assistant over in the housing department and limited staff at City Hall, that you might not want full and free access to the front door, and the ability to have access control for security purposes, not only for individuals having to touch the door and not contaminate it that way, but maybe have a little bit more security for those inside of the building, because we do have an unusually low return to work, as is recommended by state guidelines, that those who can work from home stay working from home, and that we limit the number of people returning. But I think my concern would be in the second wave scenario that we see put around. I don't want to be in a position where, Chief Perko needs to react to build stockpile or to build capacity for a second wave and needs to spend $100,000, and we've spent it back, in 6 months ago on automatic doors. So I think having a better understanding. I know a memo was produced by Chief Perko a while ago about what best practices were for a city of our size and being prepared for pandemic in terms of PPE. I'd like to return to that calculation and hear from the other directors of in your administration on what their views might be on what the needs are going to be in the future, so that we can determine if automatic doors are the best use for that total money. And the final question that I have is for Mr. Kennedy. Is there an anticipated period of use that we have to use this money by?
Yes, Mr. Kennedy, go ahead.
Well, yeah, it depends. There's different sources of different monies, but as of right now, yeah, they have put some stipulations on the ending date for spending that money. So we do not have an unlimited amount of time to do so.
What's the current date?
October 15th.
October 15th, okay.
Yeah, unused funds that remain unencumbered as of October 15th are to be returned. So, I mean, I will not be the least bit surprised, especially after we have a second wave, which I anticipate is quite likely that there will necessarily be additional relief and additional funds from which relief would be obtained above and beyond the CARES Act money that is slated presently for University Heights.
Thank you.
Mrs. Blankfeld.
While that may indeed be true, more than likely, I do share Mr. Gould's concerns about possibly hastily spending these funds when, like he intimated, Chief Perko may indeed need a good chunk, and I don't want to have spent it on other things. Not right off the bat.
Oh, okay. Well, I will tell you that I don't anticipate opening any of the municipal buildings to the public until we have systems like these in place. So I do think that it's important to be able to upgrade these systems, upgrade these doorways, and be able to do this or something like this in the process of being able to open the doors and let folks in. There could be other alternatives. The reason we went with American Safe and Vault Service is because we've already invested in their systems on the City Hall campus, both in the City Hall building and also the fire department. So so that said, I would still ask that these things be done. I believe that it's going to take some time to even have these things installed. I know Rachel Mullen has been working with the vendor here, and I understand we're looking at least 2 weeks to get all the parts, and then it's a matter of getting on the schedule to actually have the installations done. So these are things that I would be hopeful that we would get moving on sooner rather than later to make the buildings available for opening to the public. Mr. Gould, I saw you raise your hand.
Sorry, I just wanted to, follow up on a comment that you made, that you weren't likely to open up the municipal buildings to the public without these items. And I just wanted to understand a little bit more about your thinking around that. People are returning to public spaces, have been going to grocery stores and other essential businesses. We're reopening the state people touch doors. CDC recommendations are to sanitize, to wash hands, to disinfect. I have not seen any guidance around self-opening doors at access control facilities. So I just wanted to hear a little bit more about your views around that and some of the thought process that went into that decision.
Well, the thought process is simply trying to avoid contact with doorknobs. And if this was something that was, I mean, at present, I mean, there's only one door that is self-opening here in this situation, and part of that is also there's only one building that can take a self-opening door without a significant modification. It is not really feasible or practical to put self-opening doors at any of the other locations that we would be looking at that are described here. But the idea here is to avoid contact with the door handle where possible.
So I just think at like City Hall, for instance, you know, you would avoid the door handle and then you could be touching the banister as you walk up the stairs. It's just, it seems like a risk that can't really be mitigated, isn't appropriately mitigated by just an opening door, to the point that we should keep our municipal buildings closed to citizens if they can otherwise safely open. So like, for instance, a disinfecting machine where we could disinfect those spaces, you know, would seem like an appropriate expenditure. I'd like to see that as part of our, you know, regular disinfecting procedures. But I have not seen any CDC guidance, any Ohio guidance, or really any scientific or healthcare guidance around automatic doors and not touching doorknobs as really reducing the risk if the building is then open.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gold. Mrs. Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, so like I said before, there, you know, I think I've mentioned this many, many months ago, that I remember walking into City Hall probably 6 months ago, and Rachel was there by herself. And I'm like, I don't understand. You don't have a camera there. You can't see who's coming in, and she couldn't. So to upgrade with a camera and a buzzer with our existing door, I'm 100% for. I think we needed that upgrade before for safety, definitely. But the touchless doors, I agree with the other council members. You know, there are Purell stands that are automatic that you stick your hand underneath. You could have one right next to the door. Many, many businesses have that now. I've seen them. I think this is not a good use of our city funds right now for L through P. I think we need to go back and reconfigure the safety part of it, not buying a door because you want it touchless. I'm also concerned that, you know, there are offices in City Hall, and if somebody has a private office, I think we need to start having a game plan on how we're going to open business back up in a safe way, and lots of places are doing that. And I think it just needs to be reconfigured with the safety issue in mind, and this cost can go way down.
Okay. Well, I do agree that we need to be ready to open City Hall when it is safe to do so. I viewed this as a necessary first step to being able to buzz people in and being able to see who's there. And one of the ways we'd be able to do that is being able to, you know, open on an appointment basis and have, you know, at certain times, as you've described, you know, only be able to buzz people in when it's appropriate. Yeah, so I mean, the thing is that I mean, we're talking about city money, and that's not to say that the COVID money is not important, that we shouldn't, of course, you know, use that foolishly, but I don't believe that this is an inappropriate expense under the circumstances. I do think that there are plenty of government buildings that have touchless doors. This is an instance where, you know, we can install one. I wouldn't be doing this but for the current pandemic situation and the understanding and reasonable belief that it's going to be something that we're going to be having to deal with for some time to come. That said, you know, if there's some other alternative council is interested in exploring, we can do that. I don't intend to open while business is continuing at City Hall and in municipal offices, I don't intend to open those doors to the public until we have some system in place. And that is part of the plan. That is part of the plan of reopening. So I was hopeful that this would be something that council would see fit as appropriate towards moving towards getting the buildings open when the time is appropriate to do so. If we look at the quote regarding the touchless portion, if everything else is in order from the council's point of view, if it's the touchless doors that you're unsure of or disagree with, removing the first item, the double level arms heavy duty push slide, and the touchless activation switches, I believe the other items then would simply suffice for upgrading that door with regard to video intercom and so on. We probably wouldn't need all that labor either, but if we were to approve it, obviously it would be an amount not to exceed. It wouldn't just, spend the labor on a door that we wouldn't actually be installing. That would be a way of keeping this project moving along as opposed to postponing it to another meeting. I'm sorry, I looked down. Did somebody raise a hand? Oh, Mr. Gould, there.
So is this part of the money that we would get, the 400,000 that you are anticipating spending this from, or is there a different pool of money?
No,
Okay.
no. This I anticipate this would come from CARES Act money.
Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. We basically read on first reading the CARES Act approval to accept that money and to push it forward. I would not vote for this if we did not get that money or if it was not approved in the manner that we thought it was. So what I'd like to do is to table L, M, N, O, and P until our next meeting, because I want to be sure of two things. One, that the money is awarded, and two, based on the final formulation that Mr. Kennedy has with the state or county, that the expenditures, either as they are now or as you just suggested they be amended, are appropriate for the COVID money. So my motion would be to table items L, M, N, O, and P until our next meeting.
Okay, very good. We have a motion to table items. Mr. McConville, can those be tabled together or should they be tabled separately?
I'm comfortable with those being tabled together as long as there isn't any council person who wishes to do it one by one.
Okay.
And Mr. McConville, just to be clear, these items are tabled until a member of council should request that they be placed back on the agenda, correct? As opposed to just putting them on first reading?
Yeah, these are not ordinances, so they would be removed from the table and they would have to be taken off the table to be considered. Now, the mayor can place them back on the agenda and ask that they be taken off the table, but that ultimately will be a council decision.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, thank you. Mrs. Weiss.
Yeah, thank you. I'm in agreement with tabling them, but I would like L to be reconfigured to not have the touchless system. And I'm not sure why are some doors 7,600 and 6,400 and some doors are 3,400? Like, what are the differences between like M and N? It seems like it's almost the same thing.
Okay.
Do you know why? Is it just?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Because we have four doors with.
Some of the doors already have a base system. Some of the fire doors, that may be something that can be more easily explained by Chief Perko. Yeah, so that's a Yeah, that could be some of it.
Okay, I mean, we don't have to have the answer right now, but I would definitely want L reconfigured. And then also, before the next meeting, I would hope that the directors would sit down and get kind of a global idea of what the needs for the city would be. Because there might be more pressing needs, you know, than these right now.
Well, I guess it depends on whether we view, well, okay, all right. Okay, very good. All right, so I'm sorry. Mr. Gould did make a motion to table. I never did ask for a second. He made a motion to table items L, M, N, O, and P, and I should have asked for a second at that time. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mayor.
Okay, second by Mrs. Pardee. All right, is there any further discussion on the motion to table? Okay. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll on the motion to table?
Just to clarify, is that with the removal of the touchless system?
Well, that's not part of the motion, but I will be asking Rachel to contact the vendor about writing up a new invoice for that doorway that removes the touchless system. Or when I say invoice, I mean a quote, excuse me.
Mrs. Blankville?
So is that amending the motion?
No,
No,
I don't.
We have a motion to table and a second. The motion to table is with respect to items L, M, N, O, and P.
Mhm.
And it should be noted for the record that there is no objection to considering all of these items together.
Mhm.
And if there is an objection, we just need to hear about it before we vote.
Okay. All right, is there any objection to considering L, M, N, O, and P together for this motion? Okay, seeing no objection. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll on the motion to table?
Mrs. Blankville?
Aye.
Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay, the items L, M, N, O, and P are tabled. That brings us to letter Q. Motion to hold an executive session immediately following this regular meeting for the purpose of discussing personnel, legal, and/or real estate matters. We do have a real estate matter to discuss this evening. So I will be shortly sending out a link, separate link for that, but we'll need a motion to go to executive session for a real estate matter at this time. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Very good. And a second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankville?
You're muted, Mrs. Blankville.
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay, very good. We will hold an executive session immediately following this regular meeting for discussing, excuse me, a real estate matter. We'll now turn to the director's reports. First up is finance, Mr. Kennedy.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I sent out a number of reports at the end of last week that detailed our position at the end of April. Was hoping everybody had an opportunity to look through those and be happy to entertain any questions or additional detail that you'd like to see related to revenues, expenses, cash balances. I think, we've been following RETA collections. I know I told everybody, a month or so ago that I kind of pegged the figure at $2 million in terms of what the changes would be for the revenue this year as opposed to our original estimates. And that would probably be a result of the income tax and property tax. And I don't think that I've seen anything to date to make me change my mind on that. I'll give you an example. For the first 14 days of May this year, Rita on our behalf has collected $86,785. Last year, for the first 14 days of May, they collected $523,263. So that's about a $440,000 difference. Some of that obviously is going to be deferred until the collections in the summer. But I guess, as I tried to indicate in those reports, the biggest unknown is how much is deferred versus how much becomes actually delinquent. And that same principle would apply to the county property tax and the money that we get for special assessments. The county has estimated a 10% increase in delinquencies as a result of the pandemic. I think everybody's aware they extended the property tax collection for the second half into August. That's a good thing because that'll stagger it a little bit from the federal, state, and local deadlines of July 15th. But having a little experience with the county and the treasurer's office, I think we're going to be more in the area of 15% in terms of property tax delinquencies. I just don't think there's going to be enough money to go around, but it's all unknown. We've never seen it to this extent with this much unemployment this quickly. Some of it's going to depend on how, from a revenue standpoint, how the state bounces back, if it does bounce back. If, the mayor has mentioned he's fearful of a second wave to come up. So those are unknown quantities, but as you can see from the numbers I just gave you from Rita, there is a dramatic change just in a one-year period. And that change started to really take effect mid to late April, and it's carried through to these collections for the first 2 weeks of May. I'd be happy to either tonight answer any questions, get anybody any more detail on any aspect of the reporting. I did send out a report for summary of the portfolio that we have. We had hoped, I think we talked during the budget process, to get some of the money back from our fund balance back into the portfolio. We did take some of that out early in the year, but that looks like that's probably going to have to wait a while, just because of the way that, the collections this month from Rita are so dramatically down. I'm not quite sure what we're going to end up with as our payment in June. So until I get a better handle on that, I don't think we'll be moving any money back into the investment side in the immediate future. But that said, I'd be happy to answer any questions from anybody, or if you just want to email me any kind of specifics, be happy to get you any kind of detail you need whatsoever.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Does anybody have any questions right now for Mr. Kennedy? Okay, very good. Next is Director of Law, Mr. McConville.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, I attended a conference call last week with several of the law directors from our neighbors, along with the county law department, the purpose of which was to discuss scooter regulations. There's a desire among neighboring communities to have uniformity in the regulations. However, that's being put on the back burner by everyone based on the sanitary issues created by the pandemic. So that's just on hold, and I think we'll be reconvening in a couple of months to see where we are. In addition, I emailed today a memorandum regarding the rental registration program to Councilwoman Blankfeld, and we'll be happy to attend a committee meeting at some point in the future to discuss the rental registration ordinance. That concludes my report.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. McConville. Any questions for Mr. McConville? All right, very good. We'll now move to public safety, police. Chief Rogers.
Mayor, I have no report tonight.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Fire, Chief Perko.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, 3 items to report tonight. One being hydrant flushing. This had been postponed at the request of Cleveland Department of Water due to the pandemic. They had asked that fire departments wait until at least June 1st. We're gearing up to start that in the first week in June. We'll be sure to get some information out. I'll also work with Mr. Cook to make sure that he can get some of the information out when we know the specific dates that we're going to start. It'll probably be a 2-week process as typical, and then the remaining 3rd week for makeup days due to weather and unforeseen circumstances. Second item, just an update on some of the grants working on. The Cuyahoga County Fire Chiefs Association submitted a FEMA grant for PPE. This was a regional grant for the Cuyahoga County Fire Departments to have a 90-day supply worth of PPE for pandemics. So that was submitted last Friday. Captain Boylan from our department also submitted a micro grant for PPE, also a federal grant. And then he is also working on completing this week a fire prevention and safety grant for federal funding. And this would be for smoke detectors to bolster our home safety inspection program. Last, we have a target date to put the ladder truck in service for emergency use on June 1st. Starting next week, we'll be testing out our employees to be eligible to be a driver or operator assigned to that position to utilize the truck for emergency use. And we may look into doing some type of Zoom or video-based ceremony for that until we can do something more public in the future. That concludes the report.
Okay. Thank you, Chief Perko. Does anybody have any questions for Chief Perko? Mrs. Blankfeld.
Yes, hi, Chief. Thank you very much for your continued efforts to get grant funding for so many of the things that are essential for your department and for our city safety. That's always appreciated. I wanted to follow up during an April council meeting when Weiser had broached the subject of part-time firefighters from our community working in, or firefighters from our community working part-time in other communities, and potential impact could be with the COVID-19 virus, and if they should become infected, how that would affect our city on multiple levels. One of those being a work comp claim, who would pay it. I had emailed you actually twice. I know you've been crazy busy with the COVID stuff, but I know Law Director McConville had replied and given me some clarification, but I wondered if you could share that with council, how that would work.
Sure. First of all, my apologies for the email. I check my email regularly. I did not see any emails.
That's okay.
So maybe I'll go sift through my spam folder, but
That's fine.
Feel free to call me anytime if you want to get
Okay.
an answer. Yeah, this was something discussed on a regional level with a lot of the chiefs, including the county fire chiefs. Our top priority here is to our employees at the University Heights Fire Department to serve the residents in this community. However, public safety for the communities at large is also a concern because of the amount of mutual aid that we all rely on each other with. So we do have a continuity plan in place for the fire department, as do most of the other fire departments. And we don't necessarily have anything in writing that would prohibit any of our members at this time from working part-time, but the continuity and plan in place does require them to basically staff our fire department as a priority. So an example of that is if we had vacancies due to excess illness due to our members being quarantined, there would be overtime that would be offered on a voluntary basis. After that, we do have a mandatory system in place. This would also then revert down to staggered shifts and different shift sizes. We would also look into diverting from our 3 24-hour shifts into 2 12-hour shifts. The plan goes on all the way down the line until if we ultimately cannot staff our department with enough members to serve our community, we have a regional response where we would utilize members from other departments to assist us in the staffing. So it's a pretty thorough plan that I can gladly email to you and walk you through it without having it here in front of me. But it does outline a lot of different contingencies. So in other words, if members are being mandated to work overtime, it does not matter if they have a part-time job or they're scheduled to work a shift at that department. They're mandated to come into this department and work.
Okay. I appreciate, yeah, I would appreciate seeing that.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions for Chief Perko? Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Next is our service department, Mr. Picorni.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I have no report this evening.
Okay. Thank you. Next is our city engineer, Mr. Cheney.
Yes, Mayor, just 2 quick items. Last Friday, we opened bids for the 2020 road program. The bids are in the range of the budget that we have, but we're still analyzing them. I don't have a report at this time. I'll have it for the next meeting. Our second thing is we're opening bids for the Laurelhurst Waterline replacement project on Wednesday of this week. And again, I'll have a report for the next meeting. End of report.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Next is communications and civic engagement, Mr. Cook.
Good evening, everyone. 2 quick items. Working closely with Rachel Mullen, who is doing a fantastic job on the Memorial Day ceremony set for Monday at 1 p.m. I know she's been in contact with all of you on council on that, and it's just a matter of editing it together. Frank LaRose will be the guest speaker. Not only is he the Secretary of State, but he is a U.S. Army Green Beret and a Bronze Star recipient, which obviously makes him a great fit for the program. And, you know, like I said on Facebook earlier today, Rachel seems to know everyone in Ohio. So it's a good use of her connections to put together such a great program for University Heights, and look forward to finishing editing that, and it'll be up on Monday at 1 p.m. Secondly, the final item I want to talk about tonight is we're on track with Mosaic Magazine. As I think you've all seen, most of the issue, or majority of the issue, will be focusing on the high school class of 2020. We have a few other features, but the majority of that is going to be class of 2020. If you look on the city website, you'll see a soft opening on some of the featured students, and we're going to add a bunch more. So I continue to spread the word on that. I've been in contact with public and private schools where we know a fair number of University Heights residents attend. So hopefully we'll have representation from all the schools and have a successful summer issue. And that's it.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Cook. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Cook? Well, before I proceed, I just want to remind all council members, anybody who hasn't yet made an arrangement with Rachel Mullen to film their portion of the Memorial Day ceremony should be in touch with Rachel tomorrow to do that. So if there is anybody still outstanding, that would be most helpful. Thank you.
Oh, and University Heights Zoom backgrounds are available on our Facebook page. As you see, I'm currently at Jack's.
Yes, yes. And then, Mike, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about the census update.
We are, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but we are very close to achieving the numbers that we reached in 2010. And the fact that it's still only mid-May, and obviously the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic where the national census and county census can't go door to door. We couldn't organize anything on our own like we originally planned for April. So given those circumstances, I mean, I think we're on track. We're not there yet, but we're going to keep plowing away at it.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cook. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Cook? All right. Next then is economic development.
Mayor, I will be giving my report in executive session.
Okay, very good. All right, then we will go to the council committee meetings, building and housing, Councilwoman Blankfeld.
Thank you, Mayor. Referencing what Law Director McConville mentioned, I have requested our clerk to poll members of the committee to find a time to meet and discuss with Mr. McConville his memo and his recommendations, and then we'll be bringing that legislation before council for its consideration. Additionally, sort of a fun item, and I'm going to be in touch with Mr. Cook tomorrow. I've been approached by Davita Russell from Cleveland Heights Council, and a gauntlet has been thrown with regard to the census. Bring it on, he says. So the challenge is that the councils will be competing to see how much enthusiasm and participation we can have among our residents, and whomever has the highest participation level by August 1st. We're going to kick this off officially June 4th. She and I will be in touch a few more times between now and then. We're both reporting to our councils this evening. Currently, she tells me she was in touch with the census folks for our locale, and we are at 68%. They are at 61%. So we're ahead of the game already. But there is a challenge being provided to all of us to do everything we can to step up our game and get the most participation. Every community is going to need these dollars, and I think it's a worthy effort. So I'll have more information at the next council meeting, and looking forward to working with Mr. Cook, because we've got an ace in the hole with him. So this ought to be a great deal of fun and certainly an important effort. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Blankfeld. I was going to say, I thought that was pretty bold of Councilwoman Russell, because I have those same numbers right in front of me with the 61.
I thought so too.
I thought, wow, we've got quite the head start here, but yeah, bring it on, Davita. All right, I like it. All right, next is community outreach, Mrs. Pardee.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Economic development, Mr. Rock.
Yes, Mayor, we're going to be having a meeting. I believe it's on the 21st. Kelly, did that get scheduled yet? Because I only saw the polling come through for that.
Scheduled.
It is scheduled? Okay. So then it'll be on Thursday, the 21st at 6:30 p.m.
Okay, very good. Yes, that is on my calendar as well. Okay. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Rock. Mrs. Weiss for finance.
No report, Mayor.
I'm sorry, no report?
No report, yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Recreation, Mr. Erdl is not here today, but does anybody have a report from that committee? Seeing none, we'll pass on recreation. We'll go to safety, Mrs. Berry.
The safety committee met last Thursday, and Chief Perko talked about doing safety inspections in the homes. I'm not sure when that's going to be able to get started, since we're going through this COVID-19. We also talked about the firewall for the leads machine in the police department. I think there was also discussion over other computer needs, but I think we've referred that to the advisory committee on technology. And that's my report.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Berry. Next then is Service and Utilities, Mr. Gould.
Thank you, Mayor. We had a meeting that resulted in the finalization of the report that you heard this evening. I will be working with Vice Mayor Weiss to set appropriate times for public hearings if further action by council is requested on that report. That's the end of my report for this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gould. And then finally, Committee of the Whole, Mrs. Weiss.
Yeah, a meeting tomorrow to discuss the $2 million deficit. Council has been giving material to review, and I know the mayor and the finance director are also reviewing information. We just want to make sure that we make every effort to ensure that tax dollars of our residents are used wisely and that they're kept in mind while we make these cuts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Weiss. We are now at the conclusion of our agenda. We do have the executive session to enter for the real estate matter. I did send out an Outlook invitation as well as a text to all members of council together with our law director, Mr. McConville, and our economic development director, Mrs. Drucker. So everybody should have the link one way or the other. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. I don't anticipate that we'll be, when we go back on the record following this executive session, I don't anticipate any business being conducted other than the moving to adjourn. But that said, anybody from the public who's still here is of course welcome to stick around over here while we're in executive session if they would like to do that. So that said, if I don't see you on the other side of this, thank you for being here. And council members, Mrs. Drucker, Mr. McConville, I will see you in the other room for the executive session. Thank you. Hey, Kelly, we're back. Okay. Looks like we got Barbara and Michelle. All right. Is there a motion to exit executive session?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mr. Gould. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Mrs. Blankfeld's muted.
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Purdy,
Not here.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a
Second.
Second by Mrs. Berry. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee, Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. We are adjourned.
Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.